There are some advantages of working at home. I don't have to drive in this yucky weather.
Hi, Heather, I see you.
Hello.
And there are disadvantages. Every time I walk through the kitchen, I nibble on something.
All right. So we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll do a roll call. Chad Dance,
Here.
Greg Calder. Greg, I saw your face. I can't hear you.
Taking me a minute to chew on my almonds.
Okay, Greg's here. Paul Jenkins,
Here.
Scott Lynch,
Here.
and I, Amy Landers, am here. We want to welcome everybody who's joining us tonight for our board meeting. I'm going to go ahead and read this statement. The district is continuing to take measures to protect the health and safety of its students, parents, patrons, employees, and members of the Board of Trustees. Such measures include providing for members of the Board of Trustees to participate remotely in this meeting. In addition, the Board of Trustees has adopted an abbreviated meeting agenda to include only statutorily required and other matters deemed essential. Per guidelines recommended by the Center for Disease Control, all open meetings will be held via telecommunication platforms until further notice. All right. Going ahead and looking at the agenda, we would need a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Calder,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
carries. And then is there any items from the consent calendar that the board members would like to pull off and discuss on our regular agenda? Okay.
Good.
So we would need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move that we can approve the consent calendar.
Okay, been moved by Mr. Jenkins,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. We are going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Wilston to talk about the extension of our school closure.
Thank you, Chairman Landers. Let me just take care of two quick things here. Well, presentation to show, but it's saying I disabled the sharing settings, so I'm gonna have to see what I did. Just a second.
Scott, it shows that Guy's the host. Do you need to change
Okay.
something there?
So, Guy, can you go in and either make me the host or allow participants to share their screen?
Okay, try it now.
Thank you. So we'd like to start, really both of these things are very interrelated, but start talking first of all about a recommendation to continue our soft closure. So a couple of key things. Our local board's current recommendation or decision was to match the state board's recommendation to enact a soft closure for our schools until or through April 20th, which is Monday. And so this week we've been waiting for guidance from both the state board and from the governor's office on what their recommendations were after Monday. I'm not sure how many of you were able to watch Governor Little's press conference today, but today he did issue the notice that they're extending the statewide stay-in order, which is shown down here in blue, through the end of the month. And so we have another 15 days. And of course, with that stay-in order, based on the provisions in that stay-in order, that would also necessitate us extending our soft closure at least until May 1st. The other key action that happened last week is the State Board of Education. I'm not sure which verb to use here, whether it's recommended or directed. It's one of those two. I think in their minds, it's a direction. In my mind, it's a recommendation that schools remain in soft closure for the rest of the school year, unless they met specific criteria that they were in the process of developing and they have not yet fully approved. But we do have some draft guidelines that they'll be considering in their meeting tomorrow. So I'd like to share those with the board as we talk about our recommendation for the rest of the year. So this has been shared with us as what those draft re-entry criteria are that the state board will be considering in their meeting tomorrow. There are 4 key criterion that are listed in that document. The first one is that there'd be no statewide or local social distancing restrictions. Second, that 14 days have passed since the identified peak of the state infection curve. Third, we would have approval from our local public health district. And fourth, we would have a reentry plan that was approved by the local board of trustees. And then the reentry plan is fairly extensive on what they are. Well, they use the word required. So I'd say that the state board is mandating in that plan. And I think it's worth going through so we can see how exhaustive of a plan their expectation involves. So those key items include cleaning and disinfection protocols, identifying and planning for vulnerable staff and students with a special emphasis on people over age 60 and those who are medically vulnerable. That's something we started clear back at the outset of this as we identified all our staff members that are over 65. I'd say that there's a disproportionate number in our transportation department. And that's also the department that I think is typically the hardest one that we have staffing. And so that's a pretty significant issue that we would need to address for a reopening. Identifying and planning for staff duties which require close contact. Absenteeism plan for staff and students whose parents do not feel comfortable returning their student to school, for students who show symptoms of the coronavirus. A communications plan for informing parents and staff of the school district and charter school response plans, protocols, and policies to manage the impact of the coronavirus. Verifying the point of contact for each school district and charter school for effective communication and collaboration with local public health officials. And then reopening plans are reviewed in consultation with public health officials. So that's a pretty exhaustive protocols that they have there. I think there's just a little bit of irony that these are all things that we were working on and had somewhat in place when we were told we had to close schools. And so I feel like we were trying to do exactly this when we got that directive that all schools in the state needed to close down. So nonetheless, with that, as we think about the approach to mastery-based or competency-based education that we discussed last week, and as we look at those timelines, let me just go up and maybe underscore those timelines for a minute. So again, no statewide or local social distancing restrictions. And what we know right now is that those are in place at least until May 1st, if not longer. And I guess in my opinion, right now we're in complete isolation and stay in order. In my mind, there has to be a next phase of still enacting social distancing with soft closures. And in fact, I would say the guidance from the governor today pretty clearly indicated that what he's recommending is that non-essential businesses spend the next 2 weeks identifying how they're going to enforce social distancing after May 1st. And so I don't think there's any question we'll still have social distancing restrictions in place after May 1st. Also, the 14 days passing since the identified peak of the state infection curve. And I'm not quite sure how they're going to identify that. I don't know if you've seen the graphs on the state infection curve, but it's been fairly flat for about the last 15 days. So it really rose, and then through this stay in order, it's flattened. but there's not really this typical peak that you see. So I'm not sure. It also hasn't started to trend downward either. So I would imagine we still got another week or two before we start to see any downward trend in identified cases in the state either. So to me, all those things are adding up to the fact that I think the very earliest that we could conceivably reopen schools is somewhere around May 15th. And so as we look at that as the likely earliest scenario for schools reopening, to me, our recommendation that seems to make the most sense is just to stay in soft closure for the rest of the year. Enact fully this mastery-based learning approach that we discussed last week. And then if there is an opportunity, so let me just maybe take a step back here and talk a little bit more about the mastery-based approach we talked about. So in that resolution, one of the key things we talked about is at the secondary level, if teachers are going to give end of course assessments, those needed to be completed by May 15th. And that would create essentially a 2-week window for students to go back and demonstrate proficiency on any of the essential outcomes that they were unable to on that end of course assessment. And so yesterday we talked with principals, and today we had a virtual meeting with all of our teachers, and basically set that expectation for all teachers that all instruction and assessment really needs to conclude by May 15th. And then we need to reserve these last 2 weeks specifically to provide additional time and support for students who are struggling. And so with that, really my expectation is that most students are going to be completed with the essential coursework by the middle of May. And so if there is an opportunity for our schools to reopen, to me it'd make the most sense that we really only reopen schools for those students who need the additional time and support, face-to-face instruction, all those things that they're missing right now, which is causing them to struggle. So I guess as a really quick recommendation, our recommendation is to continue the soft closure to the end of the year. And I think we could just leave that as the recommendation, but with the understanding that we could potentially reopen on a limited basis for students that need us to the last 2 weeks of the school year.
Scott, this is Chad. I'm pretty much in agreement with that. I just don't see how, I mean, for the kids to have any value, really they'd have to get back to school by May 1st, and that is absolutely not going to be possible. So
Yeah, I agree with that, Chad.
I know I've talked to a few teachers and people, I know they would like to get back to school, but I agree with your recommendation.
Well, and another thing, in thinking about our teachers, we are still going to have some parents that are going to want to keep their students at home through the end of the year. And then we're going to be requiring our teachers to kind of do double duty. They're going to be working online with kids as well as kids in the classroom. And I don't know how fair that is to the teachers either.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Amy. Is really what we're essentially saying is that by May 15th, it really should be one or the other. So if we do have a somewhat of a green light or even a yellow light, we could bring back a few students specifically for face-to-face instruction, but then that would lift the expectation that teachers would need to be providing online instruction for the rest of the kids.
I know that you guys probably saw this, but yesterday Pocatello went ahead and closed through the end of the year as well.
Yeah, I haven't paid that much attention to other school districts. We had a good discussion with Region 6 superintendents today, and I would say there's, I think, pretty strong consensus that all school districts are going to do this. Madison may be the one exception.
What are they thinking?
Oh, so just Dr. Thomas would just like to get kids back if he possibly can. His heart is, like all of ours is aching for kids that they don't get, may not have a graduation, they may not have prom, so he would just love to see his kids back. I just really don't see how it's going to be feasible. So I agree with the sentiment. I just don't believe it's going to be possible.
You know, it's just another interruption of, okay, now we go back to school.
Yeah.
Just finish it out. Just
Yeah,
finish it out online.
Literally for 2 weeks is, I think, all that's possibly on the table at the very most.
And even those last 2 weeks of May, there's not going to be a ton of kids. You know, if teachers need to work with individuals, they're going to be able to maintain that social distance pretty easily.
Yeah, and I think that's worth thinking about what those last 2 weeks of the school year typically involve. At the secondary level, it's essentially a time of reviewing the second to last week, and then the last week is really testing. And so when it comes to instruction, this isn't very different from what we've always talked about with instruction. At the elementary level, I'd say there's some instruction, but there's also a lot of the 6th grade track meet. Rendezvous, I think, is scheduled before this, but there's just a lot of activities and kind of just wind down time. The other key thing is based on the fact that we're not doing ISAT testing anymore, we've actually built in more instructional days than we would typically have, especially in the K through 8 levels. Really 3rd through 8th grade, because that's about almost good 8 to 10 hours of instruction that's given up to state assessments that we don't have to do this year. So when you take all those things as a whole, it's not a significant loss in instructional time those last 2 weeks.
Did you really mean to say that you thought the last few days are always testing? I think most teachers would certainly agree with that.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
at the secondary level, it takes us a good week to do the ECAs. So we usually have 3 to 4 days that are devoted specifically to students taking their end of course assessments.
Oh, that testing too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Well, I'd like to move that we go ahead and accept the recommendation to extend the soft closure through the end of the school year.
Well, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I would second that.
So with that motion being on the table, is there any discussion now that that's the motion with regards to going ahead and closing school for the rest of the year? Is there any discussion from the board members?
I have none.
I have none.
Nope.
I'll just kind of emphasize what I think everybody else is already thinking, and then maybe even has already been said, that obviously we can continue to adjust and reevaluate as circumstances change, but in terms of some of these things that we might do starting May 15th, but I don't think that's at all foreclosed. So anyway.
Yeah.
I just feel like with the direction that the teachers have to try and hurry up and get these kids done by May 15th, if we then go back to school or try to say by May 1st, we might go back. These teachers are already so far into their trimester with their kids, it really messes with them.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's fair.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
One question, does this mean this would eliminate any chance for track meets, ball games, or tennis matches?
So the Idaho High School Activities Association is meeting on Friday. Is that right, Jason?
It is Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah, the meeting is Friday.
Yeah. So so now that the governor's issued his order, the state board will meet tomorrow and go through their discussion about the reentry criteria, and then the High School Activities Association will meet to determine if there's any chance for high school activities to continue. At this point, Chad, I think that is a remote possibility. I just there's so many areas that have community spread that would have to be shut down that I don't see any way they're going to be able to do that. If we move outside of the high school level and just think about things like the 6th grade track meet, I wouldn't say that's completely off the table. I still think it's pretty remote. We'd be able to do that. But I wouldn't say it's a hard no yet.
and the same kind of a question goes with our graduations.
Yeah, so yesterday we started, well, didn't start, but we continued the discussion with our high school principals and basically said it's time that we have to just accept the reality that the likelihood is it's going to be some type of alternate graduation and work on those plans so that can be as well done as possible. with the idea that if something did suddenly unexpectedly change, it would be that hard to come back and have a regular graduation. But if you wait till the last 2 weeks to do something different, it's going to be impossible. So they're still working on a couple of different ideas. At this point, I really think it's going to be some type of a virtual event for May. And then if students wanted us to come back and do something in person later in the year, we could. I do think there's some challenges with that, given our demographics of our students. Again, there's just a lot of things we don't know, but in a typical year, we'd lose a pretty high percentage of our kids to LDS missions by the time next fall rolls around. So just don't know what our situation will be, but if that's what students wanted to do, then we could certainly look to support them in that. But right now, the principals are primarily looking to see what would a virtual type of graduation look like.
Is there any other discussion from the board? All right, so the motion on the table is to go ahead and close school through the end of the year, and it's been seconded. So all in favor with that decision?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, well, that just makes me so sad, but I understand why we have to do it. So. All right, our second thing that we wanted to talk about, Dr. Wilston-Hume, you had some revisions to the mastery-based learning resolution that we put forth last week.
Yeah, I didn't think that 5 hours of debate discussion was quite enough, so I thought we'd throw out one more thing to you tonight. But seriously, what happened? So when we first went into this proposal and started thinking about grading, I think at the principal level, certainly at the teacher level, and at the district administration level, the number one rule, and I've actually had this since I was an undergraduate BYU student looking to become a teacher, is to first do no harm, to make sure that whatever we did, kids would not be hurt as a result of that. And last week, I firmly believed that our approach would not hurt any kids. But then I got an email 2 days ago from a parent, and we all understood that scholarship deadlines had passed, and we found out through this email that Utah, and specifically Utah State, but Jason learned today that this is all state colleges in Utah, for some reason extended their scholarship deadlines to June 1st. And I guess I've heard that that's due to the coronavirus. I honestly don't understand that, because the deadline has always been in January, which really predated the coronavirus breaking out significantly in the state. So I don't know why they extended it, but they did. But by that extension, they've now included third trimester into their scholarship consideration, which it's never been. Third trimester has never been a consideration for these scholarships before. So as a result of that, this is one particular student, but if there's one, I'm sure there's more. But even if it's only one, it's still very much worth our consideration. So here's this particular student's situation. So under our proposal last week, which was to put P's onto students' transcripts and not include those in the GPA calculations, and really leave students at 3 2/3 years worth of accumulated GPA, which again, that's always been what the Utah colleges have looked at. Then this particular student would have a 3.63 GPA. If we had not closed schools, and somehow that deadline had been extended, and she would have earned all A's third trimester. And I would say, based on the classes she was taking and her progress in that as of the start of the trimester, I think that's a likely outcome. And if she would have earned all fours, or 4.0 GPA for third trimester, then her GPA would go up to a 3.66. So as we look at the non-resident scholarship for Utah State, and where her particular ACT score falls, the difference between a 3.6 and a 3.65 is the difference between her qualifying for the non-resident tuition waiver and not qualifying for it. So that is a pretty significant impact to this particular student when it comes to whether we determine what to do with grades for this trimester. So we spent some time at the district leadership level. Heath and Jason and I talking about this late on Tuesday night when this first came to our attention, or sorry, Monday night when this first came to our attention. Yesterday, we had an extensive discussion with our high school principals about it. And we feel that going off of that premise that our first responsibility is to make sure we don't do harm to kids, that instead of waiving the P's from the GPAs, the very best thing we can do for kids is to simply count them as if the students had earned A's this trimester. So what that does is, candidly, it will basically boost every kid's GPA by about 0.03 of a point. There's some concern, I guess, that we're potentially inflating kids' grades beyond what they've accomplished. I have to balance that concern against the equity of access that we spoke a lot about last week. And I still believe that allowing certain students to self-select grades when other kids truly, because of their circumstances, I don't think have that same opportunity to earn a traditional A isn't the right course. And I guess I'd rather err on the side of equity and fairness to all students, and I can live with 0.03 of a boost to kids' GPAs across the board. How I've communicated this with teachers today is saying that for teachers, I'm not expecting teachers to give kids an A if they don't feel like the kid got A work. I just expect teachers to follow the resolution we passed, and that is to give the kids a P or a passing grade. And I'm the one that's taking responsibility for turning those into 4-point GPAs on kids' transcripts. So the nuts and bolts of that are, you can see in blue, a revision to the resolution we passed last week, which would change, instead of saying no P grade, or so no grades from third trimester would be included in students' GPA calcs, we'd switch out to say all P grades will be included as either 4 or 5 points, depending on the designation of the course, such as whether it's a college level class or not a college level class. So I'll just pause there and open it up. I'm sure you've got probably lots of questions, maybe some concerns about this.
So Scott, just real quick. Oh, sorry, Chad.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just a quick question for you, Dr. Wilson-Hume. So if a senior stopped classes, can they pick them up again? Because I know some parents have reached out saying, oh, we've already dropped our classes. What do we do?
I don't think it would be a problem for them to re-enroll in those classes. That likely would have just happened this week or maybe last week at the latest. If they wanted to do that, I really don't know that it's going to help them a whole heck of a lot, but I guess it potentially could. Another A or two could certainly help a little bit more, but I would say, I mean, 6, just so you know, so 6 classes worth of, well, 5 classes worth of A's is, again, 0.03 of a GPA point. So 1 class is probably worth 1/100th of a GPA point, or 0.5 1,000th of a GPA point, but it could certainly have an impact.
Okay.
The quick answer is yes. I don't see any problem with them re-enrolling.
So Scott, you've met with the high school principals. Were any high school teachers included in the consultation?
No, there really hasn't been time, Chad, to include teachers. And I guess I'll candidly speak, I don't think this is necessarily a teacher decision. I think this is an administrative decision on how we treat A's that, or grades that teachers turn into us. So I know if I were going back and asking teachers, hey, instead of giving kids a P, I want you to give all kids an A, I think that's a different discussion, even though the outcome's the same. But to me, I'm asking them to exercise their professional judgment on whether kids have passed or not. And then at the administrative level, we're making a determination on what that means on the kid's transcript.
So how difficult is it for, in the circumstances that we're in, how difficult is it for the high school teachers to be fair with their grading and give them what they feel they've actually earned, an A, B, or C?
I don't know that that's that hard for teachers to do.
So why not just give them what they've earned?
So to me, it goes right back to the equity right now, Chad, and that is, I know that there are students who, because of their circumstances, not because of a lack of effort or academic ability, but because of their circumstances, they will not be able to earn grades that they would have been able to earn if schools were not closed. So I don't think it's fair that those kids would essentially be penalized by getting a C when that's based on circumstances that are completely outside of their control, all that they could do, or a D or an F for that matter.
Would you, I mean, I feel like, I know that the teachers do this all the time. We make, and I say we, I guess, because I'm a teacher, but, we make accommodations for the kids. And at what point, I mean, I know that these teachers have big hearts and they know their students. And if they're very aware of one that's really struggling to be able to do the work, I mean, I know I, as a teacher, would really be generous in my accommodations with that particular student. So I don't know, I guess if we did keep letter grades, I guess who's to say that those teachers couldn't be a little bit more generous in the accommodations with some of those students?
But how's that any different than just, I guess, Dr. Wolstenhume saying we're going to be generous with all of them? and I don't, let me be clear, I don't like the change. And in fact, I haven't heard anything that would suggest to me that I'm going to change my opinion about what the policy should be. But as to your issue, I mean, if we're just going to be nice, let's just be nice to everybody and just give them all A's.
Well, I mean, I guess I disagree, Greg, because if you're in a normal school year and number one, you've got kids in your class that are on an IEP or a 504, we give those kids accommodations and we give them to them every day. And we don't give those accommodations to all of our students. We don't force every kid to have those accommodations just because one kid has them. And so, I mean, like, for example, even kids that are not on a 504 plan or on an IEP, if I have a student come to me and, well, not even come to me, if I'm very aware that one of their parents have passed away and they've missed some school, and as a teacher, I'm pretty generous in giving them an accommodation when they come back. If I can tell that they're struggling and I know we have a test on Friday, I personally I would call the kid aside and say, how are you feeling? Are you going to be able to take this test on Friday? I might just give them a pass on it and say, hey, come in and help me grade papers, or, do something different, and give that kid an accommodation, even though it's not a mandated one. But just because we give some of our kids the accommodations, in my opinion, doesn't mean that we force all of the other kids to have those. So I guess I disagree with that.
I'm not sure I understand what the harm is. Let me see if I can state what I think I heard, and then you tell me if I'm off.
Sure.
Correct that an individual was brought to your attention who's got this profile, so to speak. Their 3 2/3 years cumulative GPA is X, and their ACT is X, and on the Utah State grid, they don't qualify now, but they were taking classes third try where they were quite confident that they were going to get all A's. And if that happened, they would get the in-state, the non-resident waiver. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic. But from a policy point of view, I don't feel good at all about just the proposed change. I just don't. But again, I don't know. I don't want to harm anybody, but there's a difference between, I don't know, that gets pretty esoteric, I guess, as to when we're harming somebody or when somebody's getting the consequences that they made for themselves. And there's a certain amount of this, a great amount of this in this third trimester that's out of all of our control as to the circumstances we're in. I don't know.
Well, I guess for me, I'm not looking at this as being a power struggle, school district versus board, teachers versus, the school district, or parents versus, the district. I don't think it's about a power struggle. It's not about that. It's not about who's right, who's wrong. But for me, it's about the kids. I think we can all agree on that. Actually, I think that every one of us sitting here would agree that our kids come first. And I know we would all agree that we don't want to harm our students. I think every single one of us would agree to that we don't want any student to be harmed, which is I think, Scott, that's why I can agree with what you're proposing, in the sense that this is not going to now harm those students that were going to be harmed from the P. I think also that we can all agree that we need to maintain our integrity. I know that's something that I've heard from some of our teachers today, that they feel like they would like to issue the grades that their students deserve. I just don't know that there's a one size fits all for our kids. We have lots of kids that are already on accommodations. And I just don't know if I guess I still take my stand that I had last week. I don't know that it's right to force them all into one thing, whether that be the pass fail or, everybody's now going to get an A, whatever. But I think with that, last week we had lots and lots of philosophical arguments, and this week it kind of came to light that we really, once those decisions were made, then this week we saw hard evidence that really, truly, this is going to harm some of our kids. And there's others that, maybe don't even realize that it's going to harm them yet. Maybe they're not paying attention, or their parents haven't looked into, what this is going to do to them to get where they need to be in life. But I guess I feel like if our students have a choice, and the accommodation is there for them, for any student, it's there for every student, that they can choose the pass fail or the letter grade. The teachers haven't changed their grades yet in the grade book. They're still doing letter grades because that's what's been in Power School. I don't think it harms anyone to let the students and the parents have a choice. And they need to know what those consequences are. I think that they need to understand what that P will do to their student. There's a good chunk of kids, they won't care. They'll take the P. It means they can do less work, and they'll still get a passing grade. But there are those who I do think need that option for the letter grade, which is why, Scott, I do, agree that this is a better solution, but I still am going to hold my line that I do think that the choice, if you give those kids a choice to choose, you're not harming any of them, especially if they know what those consequences are on the other side of it. That's my 2 cents. And I think teachers can be a lot more lenient. If they know that they've got a student who is normally maybe a B plus student or whatever the case, and maybe their grades have really, really fallen because of this. And once they get a hold of that student, they can talk to them. I think teachers are more than willing and have big hearts to be accommodating to those kids. And maybe instead of saying, here's, our watered down requirements of what we're going to do for the rest of the year, but I'm only going to require you to do this because I know you can't get access to things. I think that that's fair. If you know that a student is struggling and they're normally a pretty good kid, those teachers know their students.
Scott, would you talk about, one of the emails insinuated that the NCAA would consider a P as a D grade in their look at athletic scholarships. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that is their current policy. Last week, as we were proposing this, Jason reached out to the NCAA clearinghouse to get clarification about that. The individual he spoke with told Jason that they were in the process of evaluating that policy in light of the circumstance and that they expected a change to be made. But to my knowledge, there's been no change made yet to that policy.
And from my understanding on that, Scott, too, and I don't know if you know differently, but my understanding was that change was only going to be for this year. But this is impacting our juniors, our sophomores, our freshmen, where those P's are on those transcripts. And so if they're only looking at it to change it for this year, to waive that, you're still harming the kids that are in those younger grades that want those athletic scholarships.
When I talked to the NCAA, he said that it wasn't just for this year. It was going to be it would be on the student's academic record for the 2020, whether it was the semester or the trimester, depending on what they use. And if you go to their website, I went there today to see if they'd updated it. What they have is a statement on there. They're still meeting and discussing and going through all the changes that need to be made, because they're having the same conversation that we're having. We don't want to hurt students. We don't want a student not to be able to be eligible to participate in NCAA next year based on what's happened here, or following years what's happened here.
I guess that's why I contend that a letter grade is just better, I guess, especially for those types of kids. Because even if they're going to waive or change their policy from a P equaling a D, and they're now going to change it, what are they going to change it to? And none of us know that right now. I mean, I'd be surprised if they change it to an A.
No, I presume they would just change it so that it would be ignored, like what we were talking about last week.
And then how do you issue a scholarship to a kid, I guess?
Well, is just isn't it, Jason, you tell me if I'm wrong, but first of all, the NCAA is about as corrupt of an organization as you can get. So there's that problem. Secondly, the issue is just whether a kid is eligible for sports. It's not a question of a certain GPA gets you a higher scholarship amount or that kind of thing. It's just simply whether you meet the bare minimum to participate in NCAA sanctioned activities, I think. Is that right, Jason?
Yeah, that's correct. For NCAA Division I and Division II, they have different requirements for students to be able to be eligible coming in. And to me, it's not a GPA type requirement. It's a credit earned. And so what they would do is just look at the transcript to see that the course was taken and that the student earned credit on it, not necessarily a GPA. Like if a student has a 3.5, okay, they're eligible sooner. It's if you're similar to like our high school, it's a 2.0, you're eligible, ready to go, and you've taken these classes in high school, so you're eligible coming right in as a freshman.
But somebody could have a low enough GPA that I think if the NCAA didn't change the rule and they treated a P as a D, if they were just right on that border, again, I don't know for sure, but my assumption would be that would potentially put somebody under the minimum GPA. I feel like I'm not communicating that very well. Do you see what I'm saying?
I agree.
So I think if they don't change the rule and we have P's on the transcript and a student of ours who's right on the cusp of being ineligible, that could hurt them if they don't change the rule.
Well, and like you said, I mean, they have waivers and they have a process for any student, whether they have a 1.8 or whatever it is, to be able to petition a waiver and say, hey, here's the reasoning. And I'm sure that'll be part of their process. And I really do. When I talk to the guy at NCAA and a lot of conversations I have with them, they seem to be very black and white on a lot of things. But this was really the first conversation I've had with them over the last 3 years that they really were in gray area of, you know what, we're working on those things. It's not going to be just like this. And they were hoping, I think last Friday, they were hoping to have something. But when I looked on the website today, it still was just the general updates of we're still working on. I think really what their focus is right now is the current athletes that are in college right now and what they're doing with eligibility. And I think they'll get to the 2020 class and those freshmen coming in. But I think right now it's focused on the current.
Yeah.
Amy, if I could just, I guess the reason why I've been opposed to the self-selection of grades is there are a couple of key areas where I do think that disadvantages students or puts some students at a higher advantage than others. And that comes with class ranking based on your GPA and also on the academic honors. And so as we let some students who have support and access at home self-select an A, while other kids who don't have that take the P grade, then those kids will advance with their in relation to each other when it comes to those policies.
Yesterday, when I was listening into the State Board of Education meeting, I did catch that there's a few times where they kept saying if the students like basically are aware of their choice, you know, and they kept saying that they need to choose the letter grade if they're, you know, looking for scholarships or trying to boost that GPA, or if they're an athlete, you know, trying to get in somewhere to a college. Like they kind of kept coming back to that. And I just kept thinking, you know, that kind of seems to be their leaning, you know, that the kids need choice. That's how I felt listening to what they were talking about.
So Dr. Wilson-Hume, I've got a question for you. If we did switch to a letter grade instead of a P, is it possible to do something like everyone gets an A? Does that make sense?
So what the proposed language in the resolution is that, again, not on what teachers report to us, but how we transcribe the P's on the transcripts would be an A.
So would there still be potentially I's?
Yes, there would absolutely still be I's on there for students that are not able to demonstrate proficiency.
I don't know. It just seems to me that the policy we adopted last week, yes, we've identified a particular student who is, the policy is taking away their opportunity to increase their GPA. That is the policy we adopted last week. If we don't change it, would prevent that particular student from increasing their GPA. And clearly there are students who are being harmed right now because of COVID, right? I mean, and there's a whole bunch of people that are being harmed. Those who are in situations where they have less support are disproportionately harmed by COVID. And I don't know that the existence of a student or a number of students who are, the number's not important to me. I don't see as a policymaker the relevance of the number, but the fact that there's somebody who's not going to be able to increase their GPA, I know that. I knew that I mean, that's just an obvious consequence of what we adopted last week. And so in my mind, this isn't a new factor. It's just that we now have a specific example of somebody who's not able to increase their GPA. Well, I don't see any reason to change the policy that we adopted last week.
So
But-
Greg, if I could just, I guess the other key factor, I don't disagree with that. And I knew that as well last week. What I didn't know was that the schools in Utah had extended the deadline for their scholarships. And now when we made that proposal, my understanding was that the scholarships were done for seniors, and this wouldn't have any impact to their eligibility for scholarships, and now it does. So for me, that was a pretty key factor in revisiting what we proposed last week.
Well, and I would like to add that, you know, there's a lot of things I think that we don't know. They haven't even come to light yet, you know, as like last week, this girl's situation was not known. And from what I understood in her letter from her mother, wasn't just the fact that she wasn't going to get a scholarship. It was the fact that if she didn't get the scholarship, she wasn't going to go to school because her parents couldn't pay for it. Like, she had to have that scholarship in order to go to college because her parents couldn't afford it. There's lots of circumstances out there that I think that we are just not even aware of. And like I said, with all the people that aren't even paying attention to these meetings and what we're dealing with right now, I mean, I'm sure 90% of the population out there isn't even completely aware of what we did last week. And I don't know if most of the kids even tell their parents when they're talking to their teachers online, or if all the teachers explained it to them. But, you know, there's circumstances where I think we're not even absolutely aware of. And, you know, I do agree with all of you. I think none of us want to hurt the kids. And if we know of a circumstance where this is hurting a kid who's not even going to be able to get into college because of this, you know, or to be able to go because of it, because her parents can't afford it, that hurts kids. And I think we can all agree we don't want to do that. And there's circumstances that are just more than this one girl. And like I said, it's just very unknown. We don't know what the NCAA is even going to do and how this is going to impact our athletes for the next 3 years getting into school. And those situations will come up as they do. So in, you know, 3 years from now, we could have something crazy arise and none of us would have seen it coming. And it's terrible what we've done to that kid. And so I think that none of us want to do that. And I guess that's why I propose that it's a choice.
Yeah.
Last week, we were saying kind of like, it'd be like the coach of the Utah Jazz saying to Donovan Mitchell, you don't have to bring your A game tonight because we're not keeping score. And now we're saying everybody gets a trophy. I actually liked this better than I liked last week's because of the specific situations that you've cited, Scott. But I agree with Amy. I just can't understand why we can't allow the high school teachers just to give the letter grades that they believe that their students have earned.
Well, and I think
they will accommodate difficult situations the best they can.
Well, and I think too, to give the option of the pass, you know, to some kids. I think to all kids, everybody should get that option. You might have kids and families choose it just because they want to and they don't really care. And so I think that the choice is important because it gives the kids all the options on the table. They just need to know what the consequences are from picking those. But definitely this option, I think the option of giving all A's hurts less kids. And I'm not saying yes, when we're giving a student that maybe earned a D and we're giving them an A, does that hurt the A student? Yes, it does, but you're also not harming that student. You know, you're not really harming any of them by giving them those A's. And so I do agree with Scott on that, but I'm just saying for the sake of the teachers to be able to issue the grade that the kids deserve. And they want to do that. And I think these teachers know these kids. They know them. Most of them have had these kids year round. I mean, especially for their common classes, their core classes that they have had for 3 trimesters or even 2 trimesters. These teachers know the kids and they know what they're like and how hard of workers they are. And I feel like we just need to give our teachers some credit to be able to issue the grades that they feel that students deserve. But on top of that, be able to let the students have the freedom to choose if they need that accommodation or not. They may choose to get a letter grade, but tell the teacher, I really would like a letter grade, but I'm struggling right now at home. And the teacher, if they know that they're a good student, I think most teachers would, if not all, would be willing to look at that and agree. I do know that you're a good, really good student and accommodate that.
Well, I think where I'm at is I would say we should just keep it the way we decided last week. But I'd also say that if we're going to change it, I'd probably rather go back to the student chooses and set a deadline that's fairly soon than just arbitrarily say all P's equal an A. I just am not comfortable from a, I don't know, academic integrity or whatever point of view to do that. And I'm not saying there aren't good, I don't mean that if you support that, you don't have integrity. I don't mean it that way. I just, to me, it feels like that's too much. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. To be clear, I would say we keep it the same way we decided last week. But if we're going to change it, I would probably prefer the student choice over the current proposal.
Scott, what is the technical we have a past resolution from last week. So do we rescind that and reconsider, or what's the technicality there?
So what I was proposing tonight was a revision to that resolution. So
okay,
I think the board would have that same opportunity. I think the other key thing to keep in mind is if we go the student choice route, now we would be forcing teachers to give letter grades. And I know from communications I've had with teachers, there are a lot of teachers that were very grateful that all they had to do was to give a P or an I, and they didn't know how to differentiate between an A, B, C, or D in these circumstances.
Well, that was my question earlier, is how difficult is it for teachers to make that determination?
I'd say we've had emails from teachers. Principals have had those conversations, and I've had a few emails as well saying that they really didn't know how they could possibly give a letter grade. So just like we've got lots, there's however many of us on this meeting, we've all got different views. Now you can multiply that by 700 teachers with their views on it as well.
But I know that the teachers I've talked to really would like to issue a letter grade. They have, students that once they found out it was a P, just a pass, that they really have just said, well, tell me what I need to do. What's the bare minimum I need to do? Anyway, without harming any of my own students, that's been expressed, with a class here and there as well. But the teachers all still have the letter grades. I'm getting Power School updates every day, and those letter grades are still there. They're still putting them in as a letter grade. We're just asking the teachers to do what they've always done.
Right.
You grade on what they have. And yes, we've had to come down to the bare minimum, but you're still a teacher and you still grade on what you're giving the kids. You're still issuing a grade. It's not anything different in my opinion.
Well, it seems to me the part that's a lot different is our instruction to water, I'll use the term water down. I know that's pejorative, but we basically said, teach a lot less, don't cover the normal amount of material. And then we've also said, you spend more time, a disproportionate amount of your time helping those who are struggling to at least learn those 5 essential things. That's in my mind the difference. Now, maybe teachers would say, all of them would say, that they're okay with that and that they're going to do this extra stuff. But there's a lot of things that are very different in the environment we're in. So that was the basis for why I thought we made the right decision last week. But
Well, and I think that there's a lot of students that are even just like this girl that we got the email from her mother the other day. There's a lot of students in that position and they don't even know they're in that position yet. That the P's are going to impact them in 2 years, maybe they're a sophomore and they don't even know it's going to impact them yet. That's why I think it's important that they're very aware of what it is they're choosing and what that impact could be, what those consequences could be.
I agree with you there, Amy. I think that is a big piece. There's so many impacts between the two. They really need to know, the consequences of their choice, whatever they decide to do. It's just hard trying to find the equality piece in it too, in both. But yeah, those kids that are further down, I don't want to do anything to hurt them. We don't want to do anything to hurt them.
That's why
But then
I think
the
it's
consequences do need to be addressed of, okay, if kids are allowed to choose, they need to make sure that all students are aware of the impact of their choice,
But you both just got done saying that nobody knows what all the consequences of those choices are. So nobody can make an informed decision about that because all we can do is control how we treat it. Nobody can say for sure what scholarships are going to do or whatever.
But
So-
if they have the ability to choose it though, then I feel that that's their choice. That's what they chose.
Right. I agree with you, but I don't think we should say that's awesome because they'll know all the consequences of their choice because they won't have any idea because they're going to have to make that choice in the next week or so. And they're going to be every bit as unaware of all the implications of that as anybody else. So it's not like it's some panacea that solves all these unintended consequences that are out of our control as a board and administration, and they're out of the students' control.
I guess, in my opinion, I think if it's their choice, then I would feel better about it rather than it being mine.
I get it. I get it. There's some, it takes, basically what you're saying is it gives those students who are in a position to benefit from the choice an opportunity to do that. Again, it's just balancing that issue of the inequities of those who don't really have that true choice because of their circumstances. But again, I think it's a really good conversation. I don't know what the right answer is.
Well, like I said, I do think, I don't know that it would be a massive handful of kids that, I could be wrong, but I from what I'm hearing through the teachers that have contacted me, out of 170 students, they have one, that they haven't been able to contact. I think that these teachers are more than willing to work with our students.
I don't doubt that at all.
And so I'm saying, I don't know that a student would necessarily be forced into taking that P if the teachers know those kids and they know that this is an A student, but they come from a pretty impoverished situation, but they're a dang hard worker. If I had a kid come to me and say, you know, I really would like the opportunity to be able to continue with a letter grade because I would like those scholarships and I think it's important, which I do think those hardworking students would want the letter grade. And as a teacher, if you know that they're struggling because, you know, what's going on at home and now they're having to do online and you've noticed that their grade has fallen and stuff, I know as a teacher, I personally would be willing to accommodate and help that teacher to get a letter or that student get a letter grade. Knowing if I knew what they'd been like in the previous trimesters, if I'd had that student, or if other teachers have had that student and they could kind of testify, this is a hardworking kid. But anyway, yeah, I just don't want to harm any of our students. And so, yes, I think what's on the table is a better option. But I still would advocate for choice. So I guess I'm interested to hear where people are at.
And so you've got the one kid that sits at the back of the class and he's struggling and the teacher doesn't know him or her. How does that, you know, I understand that a lot of teachers know a lot of the kids, but I would submit to you that not all the teachers know all the kids.
Yeah, that's a question I had earlier too, is if it's fair to try to put that on the teachers because they'd have to know everything about each student, which is difficult.
Well, I don't feel like we put this on the teachers. We allow the students the choice. All I was saying is if you had a student who was a good student who really wanted the letter grade but was struggling with connectivity or technology at home or whatever, maybe had to babysit siblings all day and help with their schooling and whatnot, but you knew, you know, from looking at their past and, you know, their scores and their efforts, you know, but like I said, that's going to be a rare situation. But if you gave the kids the choice, that's the thing, this is the kids' deal. It's going to be a rare situation that you would have a kid like I just described. Like I would say probably less than 10. That would be my bet. I think if you give the kids the choice, they're just going to make the choice along with their parents.
So Dr. Wilson-Hume, are you still pretty adamant that the proposal you're making tonight to treat all P's as an A is better than the student choice option? Or is it just a little bit better? How strongly do you, knowing the feedback you've gotten from teachers and principals?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say we've had in-depth discussion with principals, and principals have had some discussion with their leadership teams on the P&I versus traditional grades and self-selecting grades. And it's certainly not unanimous, but all the principals came back and felt like that was the right option given the circumstances. So, I mean, candidly, Thunder Ridge is probably the one that had the most opposition to it. But I think last week when you heard from Doug, Doug spoke on what his teachers' concerns were, but also where, you know, looking at the big picture of things, that he felt like this is the best. And I do think, I do know that I know Amy's heard from some teachers, and typically, I just say the typical reaction to something is when something gets proposed, the people who are opposed to it are the ones that reach out and talk to me or talk to you. And so I think when we reverse this, chances are you're going to hear from other teachers. And that's why we've got to understand that we've got to make what we feel is the right decision for all kids. So again, my biggest concern with self-selection is when it comes to grades. I mean, there's nothing simple about grades. But I think there's two key things we have to look at, and that is the internal implications of the decisions with grades. In other words, based on the policies we have about class ranking, academic honors, what do those changes mean for those policies and what happens? Because there are real implications to class ranking, and there is some implication, not as much, but some implication to class ranking. And then we have to look at the external factors, like what does this mean for the NCAA? What does this mean for scholarship eligibility? And so self-selection will allow students who have the most support at home, and I mean that in all facets, whether it's technology, whether it's educated parents, whether it's parents in the home, all those things, they will be able to self-select grades where others that will promote them in their academic standing, where students who do not have those same benefits won't. And the outcome of that decision will be that some students will advance in their class ranking and other at the expense of other kids. So I think that's a fact, and it's an outcome that we need to decide if that's a decision that we're going to live with that decision. At the same time, there'll be some kids that won't be able to improve their GPAs, and therefore they may not be able to advance to summa cum laude or magna cum laude when other kids could, based on the fact that I'm now getting, a full 5 points for this dual credit class, and meanwhile you're just going to get passed, and it's not factoring into that consideration at all. So those are the internal things we have to consider. On the external, again, that's where things get really out there, because our kids are competing against other kids, and there is, we have to understand that. And to me, that there's, thousands and thousands of school districts. We can't possibly come up with anything that's going to make anything more or less equitable when it comes to other kids. But when I look at standard criteria that kids are now competing against, like this chart that we saw on the sheet, and saying, what's the implication of our decision when it comes to the application of this very specific chart and what that means for kids, I have to balance the academic integrity part that you talked about, Greg. And again, this is not an easy decision for me, but as I look at the outcome of allowing all students to essentially boost their GPA by 0.03 of a point, and then the real life outcomes of that, I feel much more comfortable erring on the side of I want to do something that I know is going to help kids versus something that's going to hurt kids.
Scott, can I ask a question? Just thinking about, the internal issue and class rank and all of that. If we were to give the kids choice and they could choose the P or the I, when they could choose a letter grade, when we go to deal with that internally as a district, could we not eliminate this trimester from that calculation just within our district? We would just eliminate that trimester for that particular thing, for that internal thing. But you're still allowing the kids to choose a grade. You're still allowing them to choose the P or the I, and then just eliminating that internal calculation for that trimester so that the kids still could choose and the teachers could still issue a grade and the kids are still earning that grade. But yet internally, we just won't compare that.
So I've got to think through that.
I'm not sure what you mean, Amy.
I think,
Well, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think she's just saying exclude this trimester from class rankings.
Yeah, you still let the kids choose their grade. The grades still impact their GPA. But as far as that internal comparison that you were talking about with our kids, not just eliminate this trimester with that particular thing, but you're still letting the kids get those grades and they can still get onto their GPA, so that our kids that are being harmed with scholarships, with college admittance, with program admittance, and everything, they're not going to be harmed you know, they're choosing what they want, and they do need to know their consequences. Like they, as much as we can give them, you know, that the teachers need to help them and need to have their parents understand that. But if it's going to harm internal things, by if one kid takes a P and they normally would have been an A student, because of the situation they're in, they pick a P and that really stinks for them, why can we not internally throw out the third try this year for 2020 when we're doing those comparisons?
I would imagine, just technically it's probably possible. I think it's exceptionally difficult because right now that's all based on your cumulative GPA. And so if you exclude this trimester from cumulative GPA, all we're doing is compounding the problem we've already talked about. So now you're going in and essentially asking our counselors to manually calculate GPAs for every graduating class to exclude this trimester.
Is there not a computer program to where you can just like ax out that trimester just to see where those kids would have been?
So
You know, when we're doing that internal, if you, and I don't know that we're going to have very many of these situations where you have that student that was working for that A who's going to take that P. Those kids are typically going to find a way. But I guess, I know Scott Miller mentioned something last week where he had a situation where that wasn't the case. And in those cases where we're doing those internal things, could we not just eliminate the third try? But yet, you know, it's not damaging them for everything else. They can still get those grades, still get that GPA bump.
Yeah. Again, I think our counselors have to manually calculate GPAs for every student because it's that either that or else you exclude this trimester from all GPA calculations, and now you're going to have GPAs that don't match the letter grades on transcripts.
Yeah, no.
And kids would not have improved their GPA then, which I think is defeating what you said. So again, it's certainly possible. It'd be a significant amount of work for our counselors to do that.
I guess that's why I was wondering if there's anything on our computer programs that you could do that.
Hey Scott, it's Heath. I'm not sure what it would look like. There is within the historical grades where you could count a class for GPA calculation and exclude it from class rank. And so the GPA calculation might be higher. It wouldn't necessarily be in numerical order of class rank. Those two things wouldn't match up anymore, but you could exclude class rank and still keep it in the calculation for the GPA.
At the section level?
That I don't know. I've only done it or seen it at the student level in historical grades. We'd have to talk to Jonathan to see if he could do it. Ultimately, just for all grades this trimester to exclude from class rank, but not the GPA calculation.
Well, if it's truly 300ths of GPA, I don't know if that's accurate, but I think that's what was said. I'd just probably give all the A option.
If I could just share just a concern that has come across and discussed with principals and a handful of teachers is talking about what we're giving a grade for. There's some sense of, in order for me to feel that I continue my integrity in grading, I'm going to have to increase substantially from that minimum standard in order for a student to walk out at the end of the trimester with A grade in my trigonometry class or the pre-calculus class, and not just the minimum standard that we're asking them to show that proficiency. So I do think you'll have a number of teachers, especially in those types of classes, that feel a responsibility to ensure that that A grade represents that they understand the material to a expectation that's represented on their transcript to the colleges.
I guess that's part of the reason I feel it's important for the teachers to be able to have that option, for the students to have that option to choose a grade, because they have to work for it. And it doesn't matter that we've cut the classes back as much as we have. They're still having to work for it. You're still competing. And therefore those grade assignments are still accurate and fair, because you're still going to get students turn things in that are crap. They just don't care. It's the same as being in school. But I do feel that it's super important to have that option. And so, these teachers, I think, do feel like the ones that I've contacted me kind of feel like what Scott said earlier, they're being forced to give an A where they have a student that's been giving forth D effort. So I think allowing the students the choice is still accommodating. And if you do have one of the rare anomaly of a student who wants that letter grade, but they're struggling at home, and the teacher can see that, I think they're more than willing. From the teachers that I know, and being one myself, I think would be more than willing to accommodate.
Keith, back to your point. So how would those teachers, then are you saying that it would be hard for those teachers to just see that student get an A where they feel like they haven't earned it? So, I mean, would that teacher be in favor of this change or not?
I think it's going to vary from teacher to teacher, but I think you'll see a lot of them feel like they need to increase the expectations, where we have limited the expectations, and principals have worked really hard over the last 2 weeks emphasizing the importance of we don't want to overburden our students under the circumstances. But we're not just talking about students this trimester. You've got sophomores and juniors that might be taking a class right now that they're going to earn an A in under these circumstances. And one of their classmates will take the exact same class next year and earn a B in that class, because the expectations are significantly different between this trimester and every other trimester that students have taken this course. And so we're in essence not creating an equitable playing field for any of our students who are, especially our underclassmen, who might receive a higher or an inflated grade this trimester, but one of their peers who takes the exact same class next year is going to receive a lower grade because they didn't have, or they had a higher expectation or a normal expectation for the exact same class that we don't have right now for the exact same class.
So a student taking the class this trimester would be given an A, but perhaps if they had to take it, if they took it, let's say last trimester, because of the higher expectation and the more work, they would probably maybe get a B.
Correct. And even possibly take it next year and get a lower grade because the expectation's no longer the same, because our circumstances won't be the same next year, hopefully.
And I do agree that if the expectation is that teachers now, we let students self-select, I do think that changes the expectations we've put out there for teachers.
And I think that's what we've struggled with from the beginning is students have much less time, and I think that's why we're going back and forth on this, is just less time. And if we have that expectation there, what does that look like? And then what does that look like for all of the students, not just certain students?
I think I asked this last week. If I can clarify. Do we have some classes in our district that are going on this trimester that are AP but not dual credit?
Yes, we've got the third trimester of some AP classes at some schools.
Okay. The one thing that I was uncomfortable about our decision last week was it would make sense to me to include AP classes in the same category as dual credit classes, where we basically say the expectations, I mean, in other words, that we allow grades there, but
Yeah, if I could just clarify quick, Greg, on that, the primary reason why we have any AP classes third trimester is simply trying to bridge the gap between the end of second trimester and the test. And the test typically starts around the 1st of May, end of April. So teachers were very concerned about a month break from kids from the course before they got to the test. So the kids' grades, I'm not saying that these 4 weeks aren't important, but really it should be a 2-credit class, and that's primarily fall and winter. And this is more of a bridge trimester for that. And the colleges don't look at the AP classes when they grades or to transcribe those credits. It's all based off the test score. I don't know if that changes your mind. I just wanted to provide that clarification.
it's helpful, and it does help me feel more comfortable not giving grades in those classes. Anyway,
So just real quick, so if they self-selected though, I mean, Heath and Jason, Dr. Wilson-Hume, I mean, wouldn't we have the same problem with the standard? Because you'd have some kids getting letter grades, some kids not. And then essentially the next year, if they retook those classes, wouldn't we have that problem with self-select as well? You get what I mean? When you talk about you have to teach at a higher level, if we're allowing kids to choose, aren't we just creating that same problem either way?
I don't think there's any way around that. It's the way that it is right now.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the same, I guess.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any way out of that. So I say we just keep grading the way that we've always graded and allow the kids the option that if they feel that they need to be accommodated and take the P or the I, that they can.
Madam Chair, I need to take about a 60-second break. With that, you guys can keep talking, but I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. Do we feel like we're nearing the end of this? And you guys, are you feeling like you understand where you're at on things to be able to make a decision?
Yeah, it's tough either way. I mean, it's kind of like the notion in this position, you're going to have people happy, have people mad either way you go. But I mean, for me, I mean, I definitely want to do what's best for kids, and looking at all the pieces and all the factors that are involved. I've kind of gone ring around the rosy, but I'm kind of going back to kind of what the administration's suggested. That's good. I don't know where I'm at.
And Paul, I haven't heard from you, Paul.
Paul there.
The overwhelming, it took me a second to find the little teeny unmute button. It's a little. The teachers and parents that have contacted me are overwhelmingly in favor of going with the P and the I thing. And I guess that's where I am is.
And I've heard the opposite of that. So,
Paul, what are your thoughts on the additional change tonight about how the P is treated for?
I feel like Scott's proposal tonight, it harms less students than we were harming with the P and the I. But I am looking at this too. I still agree that a choice is better. I still think that there's a lot of teachers out there that would like to issue a letter grade and issue the grade that their kids are earning. You know, and I think choice is good. I really do. So, but I think Scott's proposal tonight is better than the P, because it's clear we have hard evidence that this is going to harm some of our students. So I really think what he's proposing is a better proposal, but I still err on the side of choice.
Paul, what are you?
I think that it's such a minuscule amount of difference that what he's proposing really, I don't think there's that big of a loss one way or another, quite frankly. It's one of those things that I think we can beat it to death.
Yeah.
And no matter what we do, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't. And I guess at this point, I'm okay with the proposal that's on the table.
All right. Chad, since you were gone, I asked everybody kind of where they're at and if they feel like they need to keep talking about this. So I didn't have that opportunity to ask you. Did you have any other questions? Are you feeling comfortable with where you're at?
I like the change. I like this amendment because it may not involve a lot of kids, but for the situation that was discussed, there might be others out there, and I would rather make sure we help that group. So I'm in favor of this amendment. But I wonder if there's any way we can restructure the language that allows student choice. If the other board member, I just, because I do agree with Amy's discussions on that.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is to maybe repeat what I did last week, where I'm going to make a motion and then vote against it. Just to kind of get the conversation focused.
Well, I think there's a motion on the table, isn't there?
No, there's no motion on the table.
I don't think so.
Oh, I thought we made a motion. I'm sorry.
No, there's no
That's why we're
motion.
having discussion.
I'll move that we accept the administration's recommendation to modify the proposal as it was included in our packet tonight.
And I will second that.
Okay, so any discussion?
Again, I'm not trying to beat the dead horse. I'll just try to summarize my thoughts real quickly. I think we got it right last week. It's a very, very difficult policy issue. I think as a board, we should focus on policy, and certainly I know everybody, all 5 of us as board members and all the administration, all the principals and teachers, I know everybody cares about the students and is trying to make a decision that helps students. And so I don't doubt that in any part. But where I'm at is when you balance all the various factors, I think we got it right last week, and I'm going to be voting no.
Even with hard evidence, Greg?
I don't accept. I knew exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about tonight last week when I considered what to do. I knew that was a possibility. So I don't feel like there's any new evidence tonight other than the extension of the scholarship deadline. But my decision last week was not based on guessing what third parties are going to do. I have no control over that. I have no interest in even, frankly, trying to predict what they're going to do. And so, yes, even with what you refer to as hard evidence, I see no basis to change.
I personally, I guess, couldn't feel more opposite. I feel like that P and that I do harm our kids. And we've seen the evidence of it, and there's evidence, I think, pointing to where there could be a lot more harm than what we can even see today. Just because, like I said, I think lots of people aren't paying attention for other situations to come forward. But I do know, I personally am in disagreement with the the pass insufficient and would be more in favor of the proposal that's on the table tonight. But like I said, I would still like to see that choice be in there. Is there any other board member that would agree with having choice? So hearing nothing, all 4 board members besides myself don't want to have student choice.
That's where I am.
Or I am.
That's where I am as well.
No, I said I would like to see student choice. I would like to see language in here that would include student choice. But the problem I'm having at this point is that's not the motion on the table.
Right.
Right, but if the majority votes this motion down, you could make that motion next,
Okay,
right?
But there's no support for it, Chad, just an FYI.
okay.
So the motion on the table, Greg, is the proposal that Dr. Wilston sent out today, correct?
Correct.
It's the A's. It's the A's on the transcript. I personally feel that harms less students. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution. You guys have heard all of my arguments tonight, but I think it's better. It's better than the P. These kids, the ones that are needing that GPA boost and the kids trying to get those scholarships, they need that.
Just real quickly, just to clarify one thing is I don't think that the other motion is necessarily dependent on this one passing or not passing. That's item 7. And so really this could be adopted or rejected. We could still have a separate motion on item 7 if the board so chose to.
What's item 7? Are you talking on not on the agenda? You're talking on this.
On the resolution.
What
So
is item 7?
So 7 is the one that says all teachers will,
Yeah,
teachers are expected to use a flowing grading scale. So those are really 2 independent motions is all I'm saying.
okay. So I think, just to clarify, I think you're saying that we could, regardless of how we vote on the proposed change to item number 8 in the policy, we could also change item 7 however we want.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, yeah, it's a fair point. Yep.
Meaning what? That we could add letter grades on there?
Meaning that, right, I'm saying that we could conclude the discussion and vote on Greg's motion to approve the language I'd proposed on number 8, and then a board member could also propose to change the language in number 7 if they chose to.
So in other words, Amy, if you wanted to make a motion, regardless of how 8 is modified or not, after that, if you want to make a motion to modify 7 that allows student choice, I think Scott's just trying to point out.
Right. I don't disagree with that. I think it's just that I know where everybody sits, and so it's a moot point, I guess. So,
Well,
like,
yes, but
so yes, this motion very much matters. It very much matters.
yeah,
How
nobody's,
people vote on this.
I don't
So,
think anybody's suggesting this motion doesn't matter. I think they're just saying it doesn't foreclose the possibility of other motions.
right. I get that.
Okay, yep.
I just know that there's not a hope for it, so. All right, so the proposal is for what's on the table here is to go with Dr. Wilston to do the Ps going to the As on the transcripts. So we're gonna go ahead and do a vote, and I need to hear from each of you because the nays and the yays on this thing are way too close. Especially for something that I feel like is this crazy. I guess there's a lot of people paying attention to this. So I would like individual votes on this. So I guess what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go in order of our roll call, and I'm gonna ask you how you're gonna vote. And the proposal again is Dr. Wilston proposal. So Chad Vance,
I mean, yes.
Okay, Greg Calder,
No.
Paul Jenkins,
Yes.
okay, Scott Lynch,
Yes.
okay, and I, Amy Landers. I'm a no, only because I'm advocating for the choice. So the motion carries. It is approved, and that will be the way that the kids are going to be graded. So do we need to go back and revisit number 7 with anybody then while we're here on this?
Yeah, I'd like to read through number 7 and see what other options we might have.
Chairman Landers, would you like me to read that for the board? And
That would be perfect, Scott. Thank you.
so item 7 reads, teachers are expected to use the following grading scales for common formative assessments and final grades. Teachers should follow the sponsoring university's policies for reporting for reporting grades for dual credit classes for college transcripts. The currently adopted Administrative Procedure 2620P grading and progress reports references incomplete grades but does not specifically identify I as an approved grade. Adopting this resolution will necessitate the approval of an amended version of this policy to allow I as an approved grade. But the nuts and bolts are teachers are expected to use the following grading scale for common and formative assessments and for final grades, and that is limited to the I and the P.
Unless it's dual credit, right?
Unless it's dual credit.
And not the AP. We're not going to include AP in that.
Right, just dual credit is how it reads.
I personally, I still state I'm for having the choice of both of the grading scales for the kids. So I would move that we add the letter grading scale in there at the option of the students to choose. You know, the students along with their parents to choose which grading scale for each class they would like to have. That would be, so I'm going to move that we add that letter grading scale.
Would that be for students at all levels, Amy? Elementary and all the way up?
I would say secondary. I do know that this is impacting some of our 8th grade students that are taking high school math credits, and they didn't want the I and the P on the transcript. They actually want the letter grade. Their kids have been in those classes all year. They know what kind of students that they have, and they know if they were an A student, a B student, a C student, and those students and their parents that I've communicated with would still like the option of being able to choose a letter grade, even in the junior highs for those classes that are high school credits. So yes, I would say secondary schools.
I second the motion.
All right, so discussion.
I don't have anything to add.
Amy, could I interject a couple of key things
Yes, you
that I
can.
think we need to consider? So as we've implemented this resolution, we've tried to ensure that we were following our current board policy on grading and to minimize the changes to procedure. That particular change, I do not believe is in keeping with our current board policy. And so I guess it may be worth us having time to review the implications of that with our policy to ensure that we would not also need to make changes to our board policy on grading.
Couldn't we just as a board say the particular motion is to modify this procedure as well as any conflicting policies and just give that direction tonight, just so
Well,
we
and
can
yeah, and it would only be through this trimester. Like this is all going away after May.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think what we need to do would be to therefore suspend that policy. I think we've tried hard to not change policy outside of our scope of policy, of the policy on changing policy, if that makes sense. So I think we do have one tonight that we're trying to expedite, and it has to do with payment from federal funds that Guy will talk about. But I just, there's nothing in our current policy that grants any decision-making about grading to parents or to students. It's all at the superintendent or the teacher level. The other way we could potentially address that would be to include in the revision that it would not be the sole discretion of the student and the parents, but would also include the discretion of the teacher. And I personally would be much more comfortable with that, because now we're not forcing teachers to do this, but if the teacher feels comfortable and confident that they can give a letter grade and it's what the students request, then I think it's feasible. But to force it on teachers still concerns me. So I think if we were to include that provision, I think that largely mitigates my concerns about the policy impact.
Unless you have a teacher that just wants to do the P and the I, but the student needs a letter grade, and then they're not willing to do it. And
But
I don't
that's
think,
that's
I-
in keeping with our current policy, is what I would
but
say.
I don't think we're asking anything that's not out of our current policy, because the teachers are still going to be grading according to the 2 grading scales that have been in our policy all along. And we're not asking them to grade any differently at all. The students can just choose which one that they want on that report card. That's it. We're not asking the teachers to do anything different than what they're already doing. And so I disagree. I don't think that we're doing something crazy.
All I'm saying, Amy, is that the policy says that teachers have the discretion to determine grades. That's what our policy says.
And
And
they
so if a
could still
teacher-
determine grades.
Right. So if a teacher decides that in this situation, they prefer to give the P and the I, and we're taking that decision-making away from them, then that's not in alignment with our policy.
Well, I know as of right now, all the kids' grades are still letter grades. So I don't really feel like we're asking anything crazy.
Yeah, and those grades are mostly from the 2 weeks before. I know that there's starting to be some, but I certainly have communicated with teachers that simply awarding a passing or proficient grade to an assignment is acceptable given our circumstances.
All right, so is there any other discussion on the motion that is on the table from board members? Any questions for Dr. Wilson-Hume or anybody else?
Well, I can see where Dr. Wilson-Hume is coming, because it specifically says teachers basically have autonomy. So you're saying, Dr. Wilson-Hume, to include the teachers in that decision with the student.
Yeah, I think to avoid violating our current policy, we'd either need to include that, or we would need to suspend that policy, or we would just need more time to vet that with our attorney to see if he sees it differently.
I think student choice, just for this trimester, doesn't do any damage to that policy at all.
But it's policy.
But isn't it fine to just suspend the policy? Mike?
Yeah, just for this try, and this is the way it's going to be this try.
It could be suspended.
But with our current policy though, didn't we just get rid of the P? And now it's just an A or an I? Or am I
No, the P is still there.
with the one that we, okay.
Yeah, it's still P and an I, but the effect of the
Transcript, is that what it, yeah,
GPA calculation, I think. And
gotcha.
what's on the transcript, yeah. I'm not sure I can keep all this straight.
I'm lost, and I don't mind admitting it.
I'd be really reluctant to going against prior board policy and changing any of that for that matter. I'd kind of be.
Well,
I'd be reluctant to go against policy.
And if Scott would point out what he's talking about right here, I feel I just personally don't feel it's a big deal, but the teachers are still grading on the 2 grading scales that we have. It's not like we're asking them to do something brand new. And you know, for this one semester, you suspend and allow the students to choose which grading scale they want on their report card.
How is that different than what we've been talking about? I'm sorry, I'm not right sure what the motion on the table actually is.
Well, I know, because number eight does make it different when everybody's going to get an A. So
I think, let me see if I can answer Paul's question. I think that the motion is to modify the number 7, yeah, to allow student choice. And then this second conversation that we're now having is, does the modification of number 7 to allow student choice violate our current policy on grading? And I think Dr. Wilson-Hume's initial impression is yes, and I appreciate what he's saying. And if in fact it does, if we're worried or even convinced that it does violate that policy, then I think the boards, for those who want to modify 7 as Chairman Landers has indicated, the amendment to her motion, I think, would just simply be that we need to suspend that portion of the policy that doesn't allow.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
Sorry, we were going through enough iterations that it just.
No, you're good.
I know.
Or we could.
I kind of feel like I'm in a
allow
hamster wheel.
additional clarification from, I guess, our attorney before we.
I have a question. I guess I'm just trying to think, if I'm a student and I decide that I'm going to go with a grade and I get the grade I don't want, then I go back to a P, I'm going to get an A anyway based on 8.
Right. That's what I was just thinking. So in
That's
sense,
why.
everyone should just take a P and get an A on their transcript if they were smart.
Well, that's why I was saying to Greg, I feel like going back, and to Scott both, that going back on number 7 is kind of a moot point once 8's voted on. But you guys insisted it wasn't, but now that I'm there, everybody's saying it is. So
I don't know that I follow that it's a moot point. So if it's a moot point, I missed it.
because they're saying if you choose the letter grades, everybody's going to get an A anyway, if they choose the P or the I, because you just voted on 8.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess, and maybe I'm missing something, but I guess for me, if I was saying, okay, I'm going to take a letter grade, something happens, I spend more time helping my brothers, sisters, whoever, and all of a sudden teacher says, well, you're going to get a C, but I can still choose to take a P, then I go back to an A.
You're going to take the P so you can go to,
Right.
so you can get the A.
Right.
Well,
Maybe I'm very simple-minded, so maybe that's just simple, but I don't.
I'm not in favor of the choice, so I'm the wrong person to defend this. But as I understand it intellectually, I think what the idea of the choice is that you would make that choice. There would be some time frame to it. For example, by April 20th, students and parents, if the default is you're going to get a P or an I, but if you affirmatively elect to not have a P or an I by April 20th, and that would be an irrevocable election, is the way I would think the choice option would work. I mean, it makes no sense to me to let people choose and then go back and forth or whatever.
Well, and it makes no sense to have number 8 on there if choice is an option. That's what I was trying to say earlier.
Okay. And
that's why I said 8 does matter. This does matter, because if you go back and put choice in 7, 8 being the way that it is currently with what we just voted on, makes it pointless.
makes choice pointless.
Yeah, because A already says what it says. You can't have 8 there.
Oh,
If you're gonna allow student choice, you can't have 8 there.
that's fine. Then your motion, for those of you that want choice, you should make the motion that modifies 7 and 8. I think that's all we were trying to say, is that you can still have your choice motion. I'm going to vote against it, as I've been very clear over and over and over
Yeah.
again. But we were just trying to say you can make a motion, and that motion can involve student choice. And sure, if you think consistent with the student choice, you need to modify 8 too, then modify it.
Yeah, so yeah, no, I think you're right, Greg. I think the motion does need to be modified, that if we include the letter grade choice in number 7 and the students to be able to choose that, it would eliminate number 8.
You would go back to 8 before the modification.
No, I would eliminate it.
Oh, so, well,
There's no
don't
point.
part of 8 in there to deal with how P grades are.
No, because if you selected a letter grade, it would automatically be that.
Yeah, but there's going to be some people who don't select it. So don't you still need 8 to deal with how to deal with Ps on the. I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just trying to.
I think Ps would be the way that they've always been, where they wouldn't count on your GPA. Right now, the proposal that we just voted on, the Ps are going to turn into As, and they will count on your GPA. That's why they're on there. If we had the option between the two, you wouldn't need to have a designation.
So maybe I'm just confused because I don't have last week's version in front of me. Was there no number 8 at all last week?
No, there was. It was the way that it's crossed out on there, Greg.
I guess I'm
That's the way it was.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking because I think I'm confused and it's not my emotion anyway. So.
Well, it sounds like the motion on number 7 certainly complicates it.
Well, unless you just
I would vote-
eliminated number 8.
Right, so I'm probably going to vote no on that motion.
Okay, so let's just take a vote. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, all in favor, because I think I know where this is going, so. All in favor,
So when we're voting right now, what are we voting exactly?
you're voting on number 7 being student choice and eliminating number 8.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not for that.
Yeah, okay, and I knew you wouldn't be. And Paul?
No.
Okay, Greg?
No.
Chad?
No.
Okay, and I would be a yes, so it would be a no. So motion carries on that. We'll just stick with what we had voted on a minute ago, with number 8 being the P's turn to A's. Okay, can we move on? I'm ready to move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll try my very best not to bring this back to you again ever, hopefully. So
Okay,
thank you.
so
I appreciate your work on that. So our next item,
Jason Lords is what I have on here for policy 2750, the academic honors.
Yeah, and with the change, the change in the policy was reading that the academic honors GPA was calculated over their 4 years, and so we were thinking we were going to have to, with the previous version, that we were going to have to change that because it wasn't going to be 4 years, but now it will. So there doesn't need to be any vote or anything on that.
Okay, so no action is required on that.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Say it one more time, Jason.
Oh, I'm gonna unmute myself better so I can. So on that policy, the 2620, not 2620.
2750.
2750.
Yeah, 2750 academic honors. It talks about the grade point shall be determined by the average of grades earned during the 4 complete years of a student's high school career. Before this revision, it wasn't going to be 4 years because we were using that P, and so there's going to be a trimester where kids wouldn't have it be, the grade point won't be determined on 4 years. It would be 3 years and 2 trimesters. But now with the change, it will still be on 4 complete years of a student high school. So we don't need to do anything to the academic honors or the 2750 policy.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay.
The board have any questions before we move on?
I don't have any.
I'm seeing a no from Paul. I can't see Chatter Scott.
I have none.
I have nothing.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move forward with Dr. Wilson-Hume on the student code of conduct with the revisions that are being recommended because of the breach, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman Landers. So, yeah, so last week, as you're aware, we had an unfortunate situation where the meeting code for one of our Google Meets, one of our classrooms, was shared by what is now a former student, actually a former exchange student, with somebody outside of the organization. They used that information and then essentially created an alias for their name, pretending to be a student in the class, and that individual is inadvertently admitted to the classroom and showed a pornographic video for a few seconds before the teacher could shut it down. So we're just, again, as we all know, we're in unprecedented waters. We really haven't had to have anything in our student code of conduct regarding these virtual face-to-face meetings, but we would like to include a revision to the student code of conduct that would make sharing that information an offense, and then and that would actually be classified as a major offense just because of the risk that poses to our students, with a suspension of 5 days for a first offense and then an expulsion for the duration of the school year for a second offense. And then also to include, and this, our current code of conduct also already includes provisions for disrupting classes. We just want to make sure that students are aware that that includes disruptions to Google Classroom as well, or other potential face-to-face meetings that teachers might use in the future. So we just ask for an approval of those amendments to our student code of conduct.
So Scott, a question, how does this work when the student was a foreign exchange student who's no longer here?
Well, we can't punish him anymore because he's disenrolled, but if another student does it, then we'll have it in place to take appropriate disciplinary action.
There's no legal action that can be taken for that?
Well, probably not for the student that shared the information. There's nothing that would really deem that as being confidential. For the student that intruded, there's possible, or not a student, I would say individual. We just really don't have any idea who that individual was. There's no way to backtrack who that individual was. We have an email account, but that's about all.
All right, is there any questions from the board with regards to the change in the code of conduct?
No.
I have none.
Okay, so we would need a motion to go ahead and accept that code of conduct revision as recommended.
I move that we accept the code of conduct as recommended.
I second.
So it's been moved by Mr. Jenkins, seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Heather Plain, are you still with us? Does anybody see Heather on?
I'm still here.
Oh, good. Hi, Heather.
Hello.
Okay,
Find the mute button.
we're going to turn the time over to you to talk about our student meals.
Okay, thank you so much, Chairman Landers and the board members, Dr. Wilson-Hume. We've had kind of a wild couple of weeks, so thanks for giving us the opportunity for me to share kind of the things that my team has been doing. I don't know if you care to see me or not, but my battery died, so there it is. I don't know. Anyway, there it is. So I just want to read a quote to you to start with that we received from one of our vendors. And she said, during these unprecedented times, you've managed the largest feeding response in modern history. You've pivoted to meet the needs of your communities. And there are days that I really, I really feel that. And I know that my team does also. So when school is open, we serve meals under the National School Lunch Program. And once the school board decided to close school and we went to the soft close with the from the governor, we had to transition to the summer food service program. And that program has some regulations that didn't meet the current laws that were given to us as far as non-congregate feeding. So we had to submit applications and waivers to be able to transition to the new program that we've been running since the 19th of March. Fortunately, because we do run the summer program, normally the state was able to give us some flexibilities that other districts that don't run summer program, they've met some other challenges. And one particular was District 91. They haven't run the program in the last few years. And so they're under actually a different program than we are. And it's been very difficult for them to meet specifically the vegetable meal pattern, because that is what, that's similar to the school year, but ours has been exempted because of this other thing. So we felt pretty fortunate to start with. And just to let you know, to date, we've had to apply for 6 different waivers to be able to run the program like we're doing. So when school closed on March 17th, we rolled out our first meals 2 days later. And just to give you an idea, the last day of school, we served 115 breakfasts and 167 lunches. So just under 300 total meals were served in our buildings once parents had the option to keep their kids home. The first 2 days, we served 4,066 meals between that Thursday and Friday. During spring break, my entire executive team worked to transition to a different model. We'd been given the stay-at-home order and could no longer use the central kitchen to prepare our food. My staff was very worried about how close we were working and were very nervous to come back after spring break. When I looked at the pictures that we had posted and that we had taken, I could see that that model wasn't going to work for us anymore. And every day they come to work, they're trusting that I have put the safeguards in place to make sure they're safe. And so I take it very seriously, and it weighs on me daily. So during spring break, which wasn't a spring break for my executive team, we went back to the state, changed our waiver, and then requested to prepare on site and opened up 4 additional schools and bus stops. So right now we have 20 sites that are either preparing or delivering meals. So we have 9 schools, 10 bus stops, and then we have Bonneville High School that is preparing some of the things behind the scenes that makes it easier for the staff in the kitchens to get those bags filled on time. Also, by opening these different sites, we were able to really reach more children. And with the buses and transportation, we were able to take it into neighborhoods where kids can't come to the schools as easily. So that was a big help. And plus it was beneficial to keep us the 6 feet apart, but also we could staff less than 10 or less in each site. So, and during that time, the guidance came to us that we could no longer hand the meal to the student. So we transitioned and we put the meal on a cart. The parents have to pick it up, but after each pickup, the cart or the pan or whatever has to be sanitized. And the same thing on the buses. So as we rolled out that second phase, there were some challenges that came. We have staff that have immune issues. We have, members that are just various things that the COVID-19 prevented them from working. So 20 of our staff currently are unable to work in the current situation that we have. However, since we started this, 29 staff members have been either in or out for various lengths of time. that we are now having to create training online, and they're teleworking to be able to still be paid. So that's become a full-time job for my trainer, and just tracking that and helping people get online that are trying to get their trainings done. So the first week we rolled it out, we met every day on Google Meet. So we'd roll out the meals, and then as soon as they were done, all the managers and myself and my executive team would meet, and we figure out what worked, what didn't, and then we'd try again the next day. And I'm going to tell you, there were tears, lost sleep, anxiety, frustration, fear, and of course, spring weather in Idaho, so cold and wet weather. The second week came, and it was nice to have time off, and we started to find our groove. The teams in the kitchens are amazing, and they have become very growth oriented. I've been working on efficiency for about 2 years. So they've used these skills to really find a way to make it work. So currently they're preparing more meals than they were when school is in session. And so right now, 25% of my staff is out. So the impact of that, more meals, less staff, less time to prepare it. We're preparing it an hour early. Some in the high schools used to have till 1 o'clock to have their food out. They're now having everything's out by 10 o'clock. The reason we chose 10 o'clock is because we're able to serve a breakfast and a lunch. And we want kids that may not have that food in their home to be able to have that breakfast as quick as we can. So we felt like 10 o'clock was about the earliest we could get it out to them. The challenge that we have had, so behind the scenes in my office, is the difficulty in finding packaging. So we are so blessed to have these beautiful kitchens where we prepare hot meals and it's served out on a tray, and it's, we just have such a marvelous way of serving food to our kids every day. And all of a sudden we're faced with packaging that we just are not used to. So up to today, we have used over 40,700 paper bags or grocery bags to serve our meals. And we project we're going to need another 102,000 to get us through the school year. Of course, there's a shortage because every school district in the nation is trying to do the same thing that we're doing. So we're scrambling to get them everywhere we can. We had donations come from Boot Barn, the Dollar Tree, and East Idaho Credit Union has committed 20,000 bags. We have 40,000 on back order. And at this point, we are 26,000 short. So we are 6 weeks. We are looking for bags, but we won't give up. We were required to take our April shipment from one of our vendors because they order a month in advance for us. And our USDA foods that we ordered a year ago in February had to be delivered also. So our freezers are bursting, and we're working every single day to find meals that we can send home. After the first week, we realized that we couldn't do cold lunches, sandwiches, Uncrustables for very long because Uncrustables became unavailable, and there's a shortage on lunch meat. And so we had to kind of get creative. So I put a survey on our Facebook page and asked parents if they would consider a cook at home option. And of the 667 that replied, 94% said, yeah, they would do it. The ones that said no, there was some feedback that they were worried about kiddos at home and would they be able to cook it. And so we really kind of took that to heart also. And little kiddos at home with a microwave is kind of a scary thing if I'm sending stuff in foil. So at this point, anything that's cook at home is being sent home in plastic. And so if we transition to hot food, we will wrap that in foil so they can make that distinction. But we're trying to think of those kiddos that are on their own at home and making sure that they're safe when they're preparing their meals. At this point, we prefer the cook at home meals because just the food safety issues. It's once you heat things up, then the risk goes up a little bit, and we're just trying to make sure that safety is our #1 priority every single day of the year for us, and we just don't want to lose that when we're sending the food home to the kids. Some parents have requested a menu to be available online, and at this point, day to day, we really just don't even know what we'll be able to serve. So that has not been an option, but mostly parents have been very, very grateful, very supportive. We do have 9 kitchens that aren't being used. And so I have 2 managers in every school, and they're working to take down those inventories that are currently out in the kitchen so that we don't waste anything. I think it's been a Herculean effort by my team, especially to turn it as fast as they did. It's been very stressful. And I know they're worried. They're worried about being away from their family and just their own health. And so every day, we just remind them, please be safe, please keep the distance, wear the face mask, and all the things that have been recommended. There's no way we could have done this without our transportation department. The bus drivers have been amazing. Michael Graham in the transportation department has never said no. He said he's felt bad that they couldn't do more, but to date, they've served over 5,315 meals at the bus stops. So it's a huge benefit to these children that are not able to get to the schools, that the bus will come, and they're starting to recognize if there's a bus in their neighborhood, there's food. And also, I'd just like to say the support of our district has been amazing. During spring break, when the order came from the governor, Guy called me and said it's a go and we need to carry this out and continue until the 20th. And I was so worried about my staff and my team. And I ended up on a call with Scott and his team in tears, and I was so embarrassed that it was on speakerphone, and I just keep it together and we keep moving forward. But just the support has been amazing. I sent an email, it was a white flag that we needed help, and everything I asked for was taken care of in 24 hours. But we're just really super proud of what we're doing. At this point, today we hit 80,000 meals that we have served in just over, it's just been 15 days. So kids are getting fed, parents are so grateful. You can find the comments on our Facebook page. The thing that my team says to me is, the ones who are silent speak with their eyes about how grateful they are what we're doing. So I was super glad to hear that that your vote today, that you were going to keep the schools closed, because the minute the building is open, I can't serve anymore this way. And if kids don't come to the building, we can't feed them. So I really appreciate that. And I know there will be discussion along the way, and it's day to day for all of us. But are there any questions that you have for me?
I don't have any questions, Heather, but I just want to tell you, you guys have done an outstanding job and we're proud of you. And I know some of the kids in our neighborhood and even my own kids, I mean, what you guys put together every day, the meals, they have been fabulous. And it's what you're doing is just amazing. So I can't tell you just how proud, at least we are of you, and at least on myself, what you guys are doing every day. So we just appreciate it. So
Thank you.
thank you
so much. Yeah.
Heather, this is Chad. Thank you for your great work. And for what it's worth, I've heard nothing but positive feedback from patrons and my own family. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Heather, those numbers are astounding. How many bags you guys are going through, how many more you're going to need to get through the school year. Just things that I think we don't think about. We know that you're doing this, but to kind of hear the details of it, having to sanitize everything in and out, of just taking it out, and having to be 6 feet apart from all the workers and have to use varying schools because you can't have more than 10 people in there. I mean, this is an effort, a huge effort. And I knew it was a huge effort, but just hearing the details of it, it's even more huge than I ever even thought. So a million thank yous.
Thanks, Amy.
Tell your staff thank you.
I will.
Are there any ideas from the board that would help her with the bags and packaging? I just wondering where we could help her with that.
I have about 25 paper bags left in my house that I was gonna go buy more of in a couple of weeks for my own kids. I'm willing to donate, but then you're taking bags from all these random people and I don't know how sanitary that is.
Yeah.
Save those. You might need them for toilet paper, Amy.
I know, it's true, right? Thanks for the suggestion, Scott. It's super nice of you.
Heather,
I'm here to help.
I've watched cars line up and children. And I've watched little kids. And you're right, it's in their eyes. And you know I have a soft spot for that in my heart.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know thank you.
You're welcome.
That you are eternally blessing children. Thank you.
Thank you. I did share a video. I don't know if you were able to see it. Something we're working on just so we don't forget. And I'll be sharing that with my staff when we come together at the end of the school year. One thing I want you to know that we did also, when we knew school was going to be out, we had some donations that had come in and we cleared all the charges for all the students that had negative balances so that they could take that off their minds also. And so they aren't getting those notices anymore. And that's been taken care of.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Appreciate you taking time tonight and coming and sharing that with the board.
Well, and I would invite any of you to come if you want to come. Mary and I had a conversation. You can't come all together. That'll put us over our limit. But if any of you want to come out to the schools and see what's going on, we'd love to have you come.
I'll be the first to volunteer. I would love it.
Okay.
So
Okay, that'd
if
be
you'll
great.
just send me a text or something,
Okay.
I'm happy to come with you.
Okay, that'd be awesome. That'd be
Yeah.
fantastic. They would love that.
Is there any other board members that would be interested in doing that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd love to do it.
All right, I will reach out and make that happen.
Thanks, Heather.
Yep.
All right. We're going to go ahead and invite Gordon Howard to present on our internet connectivity and our hotspots.
Well, Heather's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. So we have, I'll start with our hotspot deployment. We received 100 hotspots. Fortunately, before spring break, we were able to, a company contacted us and we were able to, through Verizon, get 100 hotspots. We just got them maybe 4 or 5 days ago, and all 100 of them have already been distributed. We did some prioritization because it's tough when you have so many requests for student connectivity. It's around 265 requests saying they don't have internet at home to prioritize. So we first distributed the hotspots to our EL families. Jeff and Gloria over with special services contacted all of them and they put those out. And then our next priority was multiple students in a home. And so we started doing that, and Peggy Ewing's been contacting them. So like I said, we've got 100 out in homes. The unfortunate thing is there's probably about 150 or 60 other requests that have not been filled. We have ordered 150 more hotspots. And it's not surprising, there's a huge demand for those right now. So we are not sure when we're going to receive those. We are hoping next week sometime. The challenge then becomes we start looking at, the time frame. If they come on the 21st or 22nd, we're really a small window for students' use and learning, and which is a concern. So we're doing the best we can there with those. It's just one of these supply and demand things. There's a huge demand. We just felt fortunate to be able to get in at all. We've had Verizon work with us, give us a discounted price on unlimited data for those hotspots as we put them out in the homes, and I appreciate the work that has gone into getting those out so far. And we've had some individuals requests come in, some really extenuating circumstances. We tried to meet those with this first 100 hotspots. So that's kind of where we're at with that, with the hotspot. So another solution that we came up with that we felt was a little more in our control, we ordered 10 outside Wi-Fi access points, and we have already installed 2 of those at one at Bonneville and one at Hillview Elementary. Those are up and running. So students could go to the parking lots, maintaining the social distancing, pull up in a car in the parking lot, and connect to our Wi-Fi, use a Chromebook there. We do have a guest Wi-Fi set up, so it doesn't have to be one of our own district devices, but if it is one of our Chromebooks, it'll automatically connect just like it would within a school building. And there are other locations that we have wired and are ready to go. We're just waiting for the mounting kits to come for those outside Wi-Fi access points. And we'll have those ready to go. So we are going to put those at Thunder Ridge. We'll have one in the parking lot, Hillcrest, and then Cloverdale and Tiebreaker. And then we'll go from there. Like I said, we have 10 of them, and we'll just pick other spots throughout the district to have those outside. So that is not the best solution, but it is a solution, something we can do before school's out to provide connectivity for students. The schools we picked, going back to what Heather just talked about, the elementary schools are food where they're picking up the food. So the students are coming there with their parents. So we put those locations, those strategic locations we're picking where a lot of students are already coming to get lunch, thinking that if they were to spend even 20, 30 minutes or 45 minutes there, they could connect, download an assignment, upload an assignment, and do some different things like that off their Chromebooks. So that's where we're at with that. So any questions or on where we're at with that?
We appreciate all of your work, Gordon. And that's pretty cool that you guys are putting those hot spots in at the schools for everybody, and especially where they're doing the lunch drop-offs. That's good thinking. You guys are on it. So pretty good.
Thank you.
Does the board have any questions or comments for Gordon?
I don't have any.
Paul's giving you a thumbs up, Gordon. If you can't see him.
I can see him.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we appreciate you. Thank you for taking care of our kids.
And I think next on there's the Google Meet security update that I have too, but I just wanted to see if there's any questions there. So Scott addressed it with earlier in the meeting, then with teachers, but you know, the big thing there is as we jumped into this, Google Meets was a paid for service that Google extended for free to us. So the knowledge of how to use it for teachers as well as those that in our office was minimal. So we jumped in with both feet trying to learn it. And obviously there's been a few issues, but the key there is the reason we want to use Google Meet, not another media like Zoom, is with our D93 mail, which is our Google domain for students, as long as teachers follow the protocol that Scott talked about earlier, as far as you send that out, only students with our Google email address can get into those meetings unless it's shared outside of it. But even then, if you share the link outside, the teacher still has to admit that person back into the Google Meet. And so with a little bit of learning the hard way, the teachers, so we've got that information out to them. I sent a link to Mary to share with you about the knowledge base, the help desk that we're created for teachers, and it grows every day. So we get commonly asked questions, and that's one of those that's used a lot. You know, how do we keep our Google Meet secure? You know, what do we do to prevent that type of thing from happening? So we have a knowledge base out there, real simple steps. And what we put, I don't know if any of you even had a chance to look at it because everybody's busy, I know, but we have developed those in the tech department, and a lot of them have screenshots so you can look at them and for the teachers to go through. And so it's a great platform for them to do all things within Google, not only Google, but all kinds of other softwares that we're using. But, you know, it's one of those that we're learning as we go, but I think we've made great strides in the security there, and teachers now, I think, all realize what they need to do to keep those meetings safe and what we can do moving forward to make sure that we can minimize those intrusions into our classrooms. So I think education is the key, and sharing that out. And this help desk that we've set up allows teachers from home, they can submit questions or concerns if they can't find what they're looking for on our help desk. And that was the whole idea behind that. And we've also created some help for parents and students at home also. But, you know, specifically for the Google Meet security, you know, again, it's knowing how to use Meets and using it correctly. And if someone asks to join, just deny them because they should have got the invitation from the teacher to begin with. And you know, there's some parents who would like to join, but again, that would breach the security of an outside person coming in. We don't know who that person is, because you can impersonate anybody. You could put a name up there and you don't know who that is just based on the name. So, you know, they're more than welcome to watch with their kids and all that, or even in the elementary school, if they want to log on with their kid's account and watch with them, that's awesome. But we're going to stick with restricting to our D9 through mail domain so that we can keep our kids safe. So any questions or concerns with that?
Have you had any complaints about that? Has there been like a huge list of parents that were upset about it, or?
I haven't had much from my end. I can't speak for Scott or Jason or Heath, but from my perspective, I mean, there's concern, but not complaints.
Has there been complaints? District office staff?
No, it's teachers have basically reached out and said as they were getting those Google Meets set up, parents didn't necessarily know how to log in with their students' Gmail accounts. They were just using their personal ones. So teachers had been allowing parents to do that, and so they're just saying, what do we do now? And we just said, just go back and work with those parents and make sure they know how to use their students' email accounts. The other demographic that it impacts are we have contracted support staff. So things like BI paraprofessionals that are through a contracted agency, so they don't necessarily have our email account. And so they've been joining those meets to help and support kids. And we'll just have to continue to work on how to provision d93mail.com accounts so that they can still access those meets.
Well, sounds like you guys are on this and taking care of it. So I appreciate trying to keep our kids safe. So thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Thank you, Gordon. We appreciate you.
Okay.
All right, we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Julian Duffy and Rex Miller to give us some updates on our special education.
First off, thanks. And I'd have a hard time not moving forward that at least mentioning once that you look like the school board Brady Bunch with a bunch of little squares. So from there, I think the first thing is what we found out really quickly is shuffling 1,600 plus kiddos that have special needs into an online environment is a challenge, and something I guess we knew all along, but we found out with a big exclamation mark is that our special education students are basically require a lot of hands-on, very close service. So the relationships are very tight. The services are very close, very personal. And shifting that was hard. So one of the things that we've done is we found out really quickly is that for our aides to provide services, we had to also get technology for our aides to have in their houses so they could log on as well and work with the students. So we've had to train our staff, you know, to be able to interact with the Google Suites, to be able also to reach out to their kiddos. So we've shifted, all the teachers should have by now reached out to all their parents and students on their caseloads. They should have sent out an informational letter that we made up through special services with a frequently asked questions piece that was approved by the State Department of Ed. And along with a discussion that they had as far as how services will be affected just temporarily. From there, we've transitioned to online speech. We have online occupational therapy. We have online social work at this point, online counseling, and online behavioral services. And our our board certified behavioral analysts are also providing services to parents on a consultative basis. And we've been trying to angle our social workers to work with the needs of both our parents, students, and our staff, because the support structure is big, as far as it's not just our students anymore, it's our students and our parents and our staff. So we're trying to work on that. What has been helpful is that our online speech therapy provider gave us all free access to their online counseling platform, which is secure. And we have trained all of our counselors in the district on that platform and our social workers. And they also gave our district employed speech therapists free access to their online speech platform as well. It pays to have a long-term relationship with our online providers. So we were good to have kept that service going. And then they have given us a short access for our school psychologists to be able to train to do online school assessments. So those parts are in progress, but it's been a very rapid switch. I joke and say what happened is we launched the space shuttle and we built it after it left the launch pad. So that's kind of how we've been going. And I know Rex has a few things, but I know we've been moving along for a while, so I'll let him take over a few items he has.
Yeah, so as we've been reaching out to the families, calling and talking to folks, and as the counselors and teachers have been talking to families, one of the things that we realized we see is that there's a lot of social, emotional unrest within the families and homes. Overall, the counselors are saying it's pretty good in our schools, that, you know, over 50-60% of the families are reporting that they're doing well and okay, but that we're also seeing some very difficult situations playing out in the other 30, 40, 50, 40% of homes. So what we're looking at doing, we put together a team. It's our mental health team. We brought in Ken Marlowe as well to work with us. And then Gordon has been great to help us figure out the technology piece. What we're putting together is just a spot that we can put on our website where families can reach out for basically self-help, ways to settle yourself, get yourself grounded and moving forward, and knowing that there are places to reach out for help if there are needs. What we're looking at doing is working with mindfulness and meditation options that we've used, started to use this year with the ACT and AIM program that we've been running in some of our behavior units. It's a behavior-centered program. And what we find is as the kids can ground themselves in the mindful moments, it helps them center for the rest of the day. So we're putting that together. We're actually going to test it out tomorrow morning. With Gordon's help, we're going to see how a mindful moment will work with a small group. And then once we figure out the platform to put that onto, then Gordon's team will help us get it uploaded so families have access to that option. We're also going to put into this the state SESTA program, which is it's kind of, for a better way to put it, it's an arm of the special ed through Boise State. They've got a website that they've put together with some helpful web pages that deal with how to deal with crisis trauma, and they've based it off of the certain age groups. So there's a pre-K, K, the elementary, the middle school, and the high school group, and then just stuff for families on how families can cope with the crisis as well. So we'll be rolling that out, and again with Gordon's help, and Ken and the counselors have been a big part of this, helping us get this figured out. So that will be the next phase that we'll be putting out hopefully by next week.
One thing just to add on that we've done is with our paraprofessionals, we weren't sure how fully people would be engaged with their students throughout the entire day, some more than others. We have other folks that have some time, but they've also we've been able to restructure and send some folks to also help out with food services. So that's the other part, is trying to get folks where the district has the need as well. So they may work with several kids in the morning, and then they may turn around and help out during the lunch. They're just moving around. We have folks that, to be honest, they work so directly with students all the time that they get antsy if they're stuck at home like the rest of us. So we've got folks that are reaching out and saying, hey, I want to go help with food services. The other thing is kudos to technology. They managed to Apollo 13, I think, 150 aides with technology and Chromebooks, while in the meantime we were checking them out to students. They were also checking them out to staff. So that was a pretty monumental achievement to get that done as well. SESTA, it's actually special education support and technical assistance. As Rex said, it's a sidearm of Boise State, funded through Boise State. They work with the State Department, and they are kind of like the repository and the assistance arm of statewide special ed. You got any questions? We'll be happy to answer, or move on too.
Julian, I just wanted to take a sec and tell you that we've really liked the efforts that have been put in. I know we've gotten a phone call about our son, and the phone call was amazing. It was, I mean, the counselors and your people that are calling, and anyway, it was just it was a good conversation. It was a good discussion. People really cared, asked how we were doing as parents and different things, as well as the student. But I just say the contact's been amazing, and the discussion, the content of what you guys are talking about is really good. So lots of communication, good clarity on the communication and everything going out. So it's that part out of it has been really, really good. So thanks for all your efforts in that area. It's been great.
Thank you. That was our fear. Actually, it was over spring break. We'd had a good week and a half kind of without good contact with parents. So that's where I did a little interview with Phil for the news, D93 News, and then hopped on the Facebook parent group that's out there. I think it's Southeast Idaho Parents Alliance, just to do an interview. And then our very first priority when we got back the Monday after spring break was we met via online with all of our SPED teachers and went through, hey, please reach out to parents, because I think it's hard because everybody's like, okay, now what? And so hopefully by now, we're starting to settle in. And the hard part is, let's be honest, we want the kids back. What do? You deal with the hand you're dealt, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's definitely been a tricky time, I think, especially with all of the laws that are hinging around all of the special education stuff. And it just almost seems nightmarish to me to try and navigate that. So we appreciate Rex and Julian for everything that you guys are working with and having to deal with and sit through all the meetings and try and navigate the nightmare, because in my opinion, it is a big nightmare. So
thank you, Amy. Thank you, guys.
Rex?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people north of the border that really like your shirt, but I would prefer a different color.
Well, I'm a Bonneville guy, but I did coach my kids through Rigby, so
okay.
Every once in a while I wear it.
Thank you, Rex and Julian, for everything. We appreciate you. If there's no further discussion or questions, we can go ahead and move forward. Is there anything else from the board? Okay. All right. Dr. Wilstenham, with regards to our students and teachers.
So Amy, just in the interest of time and for the sake of us having something to talk about next week, why don't we postpone that one and move on to the action items?
I am more than happy. Let's pull it off. Mary, if you could put that on for upcoming agenda items, we'll move that.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. We need, I guess, Guy Wainsgard about the policy for initial consideration.
Yeah. So one of the things that's come up over the last several weeks has to do with whether or not we're able to continue paying all of our employees who are paid with federal money while they're at home working reduced hours. There's a provision called time and effort that we have to document the hours of all of those employees. And now that employees are working from home, that has become pretty near impossible to make that documentation happen. And so the guidance we've received is that we need to adopt a policy that says in emergency closures, as long as we are paying our state-funded employees to work from home, that we can continue to pay our federal employees. We just have to treat both sets of employees the same. And so we do need to move this one through rather quickly. And so in working with Mary and Scott, it seems the best way that we is that tonight would be the initial consideration, and we would put it out for 14-day review on April 29th, and then go to final adoption on May 13th would be the proposal. And as long as we have this in place by the end of the fiscal year, then everything that we've done for this year counts.
Okay, just thinking through that, we could go initial tonight and then go to 21-day review next week, couldn't we? And then we're really only shortchanging our 30-day by 9 days.
Yep, that would be fine.
I think that's the
Alright.
more important of the timelines, is the 30-day review one.
So is there any questions for Mr. Wainsgard with regards to this policy that they're talking about?
I don't have any.
I don't have any.
Okay.
In fact, I think, Mary, jump in if you think I'm wrong. I think the board could go and approve this for 30-day, for however many days are between now and the board meeting, and we could just skip even the initial step. We've done that before to expedite things, and then just put it out for review immediately if the board wanted to.
I think we could. However, I don't know if they've really read it.
I've talked to Guy personally.
I'm comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable as well.
Absolutely.
All right, with that
Hey.
in mind, then what were you going to say something, Mary?
It would need to be motioned to go under 30-day review, and we're not listed as an action item.
All right.
Put it on next week.
Yeah, Mary, if you could put that on our list to add to our agenda items as well.
For next week,
Yeah,
the motion next week.
yeah, that's going to need to be done as soon as possible.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Guy. I appreciate that. Is there any questions? Does anybody have questions for Guy?
I have none.
Okay. All right. So looking at the agenda items for next week, Mary, I've given you a couple here just in the past few minutes. And then also, I think we're going to be changing all of those work sessions to special meetings. Is that correct, Mary?
I think that's sort of what Scott was mentioning the other day.
Dr. Wilston-Hume, is that the directive that we need to make those all special meetings?
I hope we're turning the other side of it, but I think it's helpful if we do.
Okay.
Okay.
So then would we be adding one for May 6th? Because right now we don't have one.
I guess I'd leave that up to the board's discretion. I feel like now that we've got a decision about the end of school, I think largely, I think the changes we need to make to get through have been made. So I could see that we would not necessarily need one on May 6th.
Okay. And I'm noticing on here that on May 5th, we have the retirement open house. How are we going to be handling that?
Yeah, I don't see any way we'll be able to do a retirement open house. So
Would we possibly consider doing that in a format, something like we're doing now?
yeah, I think we could certainly send it out to our teachers as an invitation to participate in if they'd like to. I just,
Yeah.
I just think about
would actually occur. So typically there's a very brief and not very effective speech. I think I've done that the last 2 years. And then we award them an item, and we wouldn't be able to do that. So I'm not saying we couldn't, I would just have to think about what does that really look like.
Could,
I thought Amy?
I was gonna say, I mean, I know to give them the item, I know what you guys have given in the past on some of the years. And I don't know if this is just a dumb idea, then chalk it up to a dumb idea. You know how they've had those drive-by parade things for all of the missionaries for birthday parties. Have you guys, I know you probably haven't thought about any of this because it's too recent, but maybe if they drove by and we could hand them their stuff and tell them thank you. I don't know if that would work. We wouldn't have everybody there because it wouldn't be okay to have everybody there. So there would be no speech. It would just maybe be a time announced and they could come pick up.
Yeah. I don't think it's a
gift.
And
I don't know, something to think about.
Yeah, whether the retiring people would find that helpful and respectful and good for them. I mean, that's really what it's all about, is what are they going to feel? And I'm 100% supportive of that. If those administrators who would have a better sense of that than me think that they would enjoy that or find that beneficial, then great, let's do it. If not, then obviously that's the point. So,
yeah. And I would just want to make sure we're not under a stay in order as well.
And I would like to thank Mary for putting the Alturas Charter School on our regular meeting in May. So thank you for reaching out to them, Mary.
You're welcome.
Is there any other items for the agenda for upcoming meetings?
Amy, I don't know if this would necessarily be another item, but we got a letter from the Idaho School Board Association in conjunction with the teachers organization about negotiations, and that those negotiations would be extended or suspended. I'm not sure what the correct wording would be, but Scott, is that how we're treating that? We're just following that advice?
Well, it's more complicated than that. So the issue is that there are state statutes dictating when we have to issue teacher contracts. And so the point of that letter is, and I appreciate it, is a mutually agreed sentiment from both the ISBA and the Teachers Association that negotiating finances right now doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And we'd already had that conversation with our local BEA. So if you're in an adversarial relationship, that letter might have helped, but we'd already had that conversation and talked about that we would commence with negotiating the language part of the negotiations of the things that are included in the master agreement outside of compensation already. But the bottom line is we're going to have to at some point talk about what do we do with teacher contracts. And I'll just say it's not simple. It used to be not too long ago that we could simply issue contracts based on the current year's contracts and say we'll figure out the increases when we get all the finances figured out. But right now there's mandatory statutory minimums that includes pay increases, and that makes it super hard to just say we're going to issue this year's contracts. So that's a long answer to a short question, but I think what we'll start with is seeing if there are items in the body of the master agreement we need to talk through or negotiate, and then hopefully we'll have sufficient time to negotiate. But at this point, it wouldn't surprise me if we're not spending an all day or two sessions in June to do the negotiations.
My worry is, of course, state revenue is probably starting to drop with sales tax income, income tax income from 2020 will probably decline. So I'm just worried about where that's all going to settle in.
Yeah, it's a super hard issue, Chad, and that's why it's
we've been informally told to plan on a 5% holdback next year, but it is just exceptionally hard to do that in K-12 because so many items are designated in statute to be funded for certain things that everybody's scratching their heads on whether the governor can tell us that we have discretion or if they have to reconvene the legislature to give us discretion on those things. It's just super messy, and I don't know when we're going to get a clear answer.
Okay, thank you.
Does that need to be put on an agenda, or because it was
No.
brought up under agenda items?
I don't, negotiations.
Just all the stuff Chad was mentioning, do we need to have that on an agenda for us to talk about, or?
I don't think so unless the board wants us to forestall negotiating the language of the master agreement. Or if the board wants to do something fundamentally different with negotiations than we've done in the past, which is basically delegating that to the superintendent and executive team to handle.
All right, so that's what I was asking. Okay. Is there anything else? Are we good to keep on moving?
Oh, Amy,
Yes.
I spoke with Scott Miller and he will join the Thunder Ridge, join up with Thunder Ridge on April 29th for their school student council report.
That's perfect, Mary. Thank you.
So I think the other thing that that's a holdover from 2 weeks ago, or was it last? I guess it's last week. Is just the direction we need from the board regarding the curriculum adoption policy. So I know we talked about. I don't know if that's going all the way to the May meeting, or if we wanted to do that on a work session prior to the May meeting. I don't remember what the consensus was. Do you, Mary, or does anybody have?
That was sort of confusing to me as well. I sort of picked up that they wanted to start discussion in May. I don't know. It was confusing to me as well.
If we have a meeting set for next Wednesday at 5, I think my suggestion would be that we put that on that agenda to talk about. Delaying it doesn't make a lot of sense, but
Is this the dual credit conversation?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Next week's meeting's at 11:30.
Okay. I think there should be room in that meeting.
All right, Mary, go ahead and let's put that on that.
The curriculum policy review.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And so for April 22nd.
Okay.
Okay. Are we good to move on? Okay. So the board will enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061B to consider the evaluation, disciplining, or dismissal of an employee or staff member. The executive session will be closed to the public as permitted by law. We would need a motion to move into executive session.
I so move.
A second.
Okay, been motioned by Mr. Calder, seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote. Sorry. Thank you, Mary. Chad Dance.
Yes.
Greg Calder. Greg, did I hear you?
Yes.
Oh, you're muted. Okay. Paul Jenkins.
Yes.
Scott Lynch.
Yes.
And I, Amy Landers, am a yes. So.
Amy, if you can give me just a second, I'm seeing. Okay. Okay, I think we are back streaming again, so we should be okay.
Is anybody seeing Paul?
Yes.
Oh, there you are, Paul. Okay.
I'm right here.
Gotcha.
Gotta work harder than that to get rid of me.
We don't want to get rid of you. Okay. We would need a motion on employee J2020.
So I move that we accept the resignation letter from employee J 2020 effective at the end of this school year, and that we now end that employee's probation.
Okay, there's a motion on the table by Mr. Calder,
Second,
seconded by Mr. Dance. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We would need a motion for employee in 2020.
I didn't get a super clear note, but let me take a shot and then somebody can jump in if we need to change it. I move that we extend the suspension with pay for employee in 2020 until the end of the year. Till the end of the year, excuse me.
Is that sufficient? District office, is that a good, we're good with that motion? Sure.
does
Okay,
it
well,
need-
just keep going.
does it need?
Sorry,
to
I was
be
on mute.
Okay.
Yes,
till
I think that's
the
sufficient.
investigation or the end of the school year?
Sorry, Chad, what did you say?
Does the suspension need to extend to the end of the investigation? Or does it, or just the end of the school year?
My suggestion would be for the remaining days of his 2019-2020 contract, because chances are he's on an extended contract, and then we would, as he said, if this isn't concluded by the start of his 2021 contract, then we would basically address that at that time.
Okay.
So I modify my motion so that the suspension is extended until the end of his 2020 contract.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table by Mr. Calder. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Dance. Any discussion? Well, like, we can't really have discussion in open meeting about this unless it's, I guess we don't use names, but I think all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I don't know what the rules are on discussion when it's coming out of executive, so. So motion carries on that one. And then we would need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I was gonna say, does nobody want to leave? Okay,
I
it's
was
only
muted.
been 3.5 hours. Okay, who seconded that?
I think I did.
Greg. So it was motioned by Mr. Dance, seconded by Mr. Calder, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I thought this was gonna be a quick meeting, you guys.
Next week.
I told my kids I'd catch a show with them, and they keep coming in here and bugging me, and I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
still in. So,
Start your movie. Next week will be better. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
thanks, you guys.
Hey, guys.
Aye.
Aye.